much appreciate you, Mr. Victor. Shavuot everybody. This week we will begin our review of the most relevant vocabulary, Hebrew words regarding Passover and all things Passover related. So let's jump into it. Can everybody see my screen? I'm assuming you guys can see my screen. Okay. All right. Heather, would you like to begin it's not exactly appropriate to call it a blessing. Would you like to begin the prayer before
Yes.
the study? All right, entering a place of study. B'chavod. You can read
Yehi,
through the entire thing if you would like.
okay. Yehi ratzon milefanecha Adonai Elohai. Shelo akoshel bidvar halakha. Shelo omar al tameh tahor. Wa al tahor tameh. Wa al mutar asur. Wa al asur mutar. Wa akoshel bidvar halakha. Wa ismahu bi wa yismahu bi havarai. Wa al yikashlu havarai bidvar halakha. Wa esmach bahem.
Beautiful. All right. Kol hakavod. Let's translate it. Yehiralson milafonecha, may it be favorable, may it be your will before you, Adonai Elohai, O Eternal, my God. Shela akoshel, that I shall not stumble, bidvar halakha, in a matter of halakha, in a point of the systematic application of your commandments. Shela omar, that I should not say, al tameh, regarding what is impure, tahor, that it's pure. Wa al tahor, nor regarding what is pure, tameh, that it's impure. Wa al mutar, nor regarding what is permitted, mutar, asur, that is forbidden. Wa al asur, nor regarding what is forbidden, mutar, that it's permitted. Wa al koshel bidvar halakha, and in doing so, with such precaution, al koshel, and I shall not stumble bidvar halakha, in a matter of halakha, in a point of proper application and a systematic way of your commandments. وَيِسْمَحُوا bi, and they shall rejoice with me, haberai, my fellows, al yikoshalu, and they too shall not stumble, haberai, my fellows, bidvar halakha, on any point of the proper systematic application of your commandments, and I shall rejoice with them. And everybody said, Can you hear our son? May it be his will. Can you hear our son? Omar, Amen.
Amen.
So, in the meantime, we can recite the Shema. All right, let's say this together. I will say it in English, and then we can follow along in the transliteration. Can you guys see the transliteration? We're not going to do the entire Shema, just the first little section of the three. All right. We can say in English together, Heed Israel, the eternal is our God. The eternal is one. So let's say together, make sure your mics are turned off, but please say it aloud together with us. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. Follow along in the transliteration or in the Hebrew. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה أشر آنخي مصبخا هيم على لبابخا وشنن توم لبانخا وذي برطابم بشيرتخا ببثخا وبلختخا ودرخ وشخ بخا وكمخا وقشرتهم لأث عليا ذاخا وهايو لطافث بن عناخا وخفبتهم على زوزث بثاخا وبيش عراخا. All right. So before we forget, it is the month of Nisan. So we have up until halfway through the month to say the blessing to the Creator for his renewing of the moon, right? You can find that in pretty much any Sidur, any prayer book of traditional classical Judaism of any stream or variety. We will not go through that right now. Also, please remember to distinguish between the Sabbath day and the new week if you have not already done so. You can also find this in any traditional prayer book associated with any of the historical people of Israel. This is a Torah commandment. It is a direct command by God. It's understood by the sages of Israel in the words of the Ten Commandments itself, where it says you should remember the Sabbath day. That word for remember is zachor, and remember, this word for remember is the same word for mention. So how do we remember the Sabbath day and sanctify it? By mentioning its sanctity at its beginning to demark its beginning at the end of the week, and by mentioning its sanctity at the conclusion of the Sabbath. So one has up until midweek in order to do that, though we're supposed to do it uh, from the outset at the appearance of 3 medium-sized stars Saturday night. All right. So that's every week. Now, this is the month of Nisan, what is called, after the first major exile. We adopted some of the names of the Mediterranean months, not Mediterranean, Mesopotamian names for the months. But in the Torah, God commands it as the first of months. So on the first of months, often called Nisan, one who goes out to the fields and gardens, if you see the blossoming of trees and twigs sprouting, you recite this blessing. I will recite it for you guys, and then we will translate. So please feel free to write this down. And then when you go outside, if you see any trees budding, remember this, and you can recite this praise to God according to the tradition of the sons of the prophets. Repeat after me with your mics off, please. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shelo isar בעולמו כלום, וברא ובריות עובף נאף כזה להתנאף בהם בני אדם. I'll read it one more time at a more natural pace. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שלא חסר בעולם כלום וברא ובריות טובות נאף כדי להתנאף בהם בני אדם. That means, most worthy of praise and source of all blessing are you, O Eternal, the powerful authority over us, King of all existence, who has not lacked in his world anything, and he created within it various creations that are goodly, good and pleasant, in order that in them the sons of man shall find delight, and beauty. Right? And everybody said, Amen. Amen.
Is that done at the first budding of something in the yard, or every time a new tree buds, that kind
The
of thing?
first time, and well, anytime in the month of Nisan, there's like anything in rabbinic Jewish law, you can find different opinions regarding certain aspects of the details of it. So you could say it says the month of Nisan just because that's when it usually occurs, especially in the land of Israel. But perhaps if there's a second budding, you could say it again. And then, which is more the mainstream, people would say it has to be specifically in the month of Nisan. My opinion is more along the lines of what the Rambam says in Hilchot Baruchot, the laws of blessings, where he says, as it states at the beginning, we can find it here, in chapter 10 of the laws of blessings in the Mishneh Torah, that the general principle is that one should cry out to the Almighty concerning the future and request compassion, that one should give thanks for the past and glorify and praise Him according to His ability, and that it is praiseworthy to increase in the giving of glory and praise to the eternal at all times. So, okay, certainly what I'm going to say is not the mainstream opinion, but I am inclined to say that the sages of Israel established these blessings in order to have a common culture among the people of Israel, that there would be a common baseline working vocabulary among the Jewish people in an effort to preserve the language, but simultaneously to magnify and increase the praise of God in this world and our continual awareness of Him. And that the entire concept of being wary of, to be careful not to say a blessing in vain, that entire concept is in order to distance us from haphazardly saying His name, from haphazardly saying these blessings not in a mind frame of reverence or at inappropriate times, right? But when expressing concern for not saying these blessings that they established at inappropriate times, I don't think that their intent was hypervigilant concern that maybe they're violating some super nuanced, one specific super nuanced perspective on their delineation of when you would say it. But rather, I think what it means is not saying these blessings at times that the content of the blessing in a broader sense is not applicable, in which case you would be saying it haphazardly, and that could be understood as violating the Torah prohibition of saying His name in vain. But if the content of the blessing is appropriate, right? And of course, people could dispute that, but I really don't think they intended that it be disputed to the point that people are so afraid that they end up hardly ever, if ever, saying these blessings. And that's the point that the mainstream establishment, at least in the ultra-Orthodox so-called world, has reached. There are many blessings that they essentially never say because they're so worried about not saying God's name in vain. Let's put it simply. If you are saying God's name in a mindset of reverence and awe before Him, and you're saying it with intent to magnify His name in this world, to increase awareness of His existence in this world, and the content of the blessing is appropriate to the circumstance in which you're saying it, I don't see any issue of saying the name in vain. And even if you perhaps violated the rabbinic aspect of when one would say that blessing, then in worst case scenario, you're violating a rabbinic detail on when you should say it, but you would not be violating the Torah prohibition of taking His name in vain because you're saying it with intent to magnify His name and you're not saying it haphazardly. So, in my understanding, the entire point is to avoid haphazard, irreverent uttering of God's name, but not at all intended to make us feel like we're walking on eggshells, such that, or to the point that we would be hesitant to proclaim His praise in the language He chose to give His Torah. Right. So
Yeah,
that's my take on it.
makes sense.
All right.
So
So in
intention
that,
is
go ahead.
big part of it, and it's more of an obligation on Nissan. It's maybe beautiful if your intention is good the rest of the year.
I think it's very likely that had they been living in an environment where there are, or at least awareness of what's called rebloomings or multiple multi-seasonal blooms, that they may have mentioned that for any time it's blooming. But if you know the Middle East, you know that that is extremely rare that such a thing would happen, if ever,
Mm.
for most species, because the rain is so sparse. Sometimes even the first bloom may be delayed, but generally the blooming is in Nisan. And that's something that people who have not lived for any significant amount of time in the Middle East would be unaware of. They may say, oh, it says the month of Nisan, so it has to specifically be in the month of Nisan. But if you live there, you know that that's just when it happens. You know, it doesn't happen any other time, generally speaking. All right. Any other questions regarding that before we move on?
Just another point. You said earlier to do the Rosh Kodesh blessing by
Yes.
midweek. I think you meant by mid-month, and
Yes, I
uh,
meant by mid-month. Thank you
and
for
you do it
correcting.
every month, not every week.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much appreciate that. You guys don't be afraid to correct me. I certainly make mistakes. Sometimes I make mistakes, and if I have it pointed out, I immediately know that was a mistake. Other times I might make a mistake thinking that is correct. So, uh, learning with us here at the Mishnah Walk or under any rabbi or any teacher does not absolve you of your personal responsibility to confirm things. Uh, consider us, relatively speaking, experienced guides, but certainly no authority and no infallible authority in and of ourselves. All right, so here you can find the new moon blessing in the Hebrew Ways of Torah Sidur on page 86. Okay, and you can also find it in any mainstream Jewish prayer book. You can say this up to halfway point of the month, but one should say it the first time you see the moon reappearing. And for those who may assume, yes, we're aware that the mainstream practice is not to say it when you first see it. That is based on post-Talmudic, in fact, post-Zohar influence. So for those who want to uphold the words of our sages in the most authentic way, historically authentic way, please say this blessing at your first chance upon seeing the renewal of the moon. Yalla, bo'u namshich. We are in the beginning of the Mishneh Torah, so please know where you can always find this anytime during the week if you would like to review the 613 everlasting commandments of God that are the unchanging, the immutable stipulations and conditions of God's everlasting covenant with the people of Israel. Okay, so at the beginning of Mishneh Torah, we are in the restrictive commandments, the prohibitive commandments. Heather, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, we're on number 217.
I believe that's correct.
All right, we'll go with your hunch. You know as good as anyone else. All right, yalla bo'u nathil. Mi haba batur. Who's next in line?
Ani haba'a.
Bachavod, go right ahead. And when you finish, please ask who's next in Hebrew. Mi haba. Who is next? Bachavod.
Not to sow grain or vegetables in a vineyard, as Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 9 states, do not plant different species in your vineyard. Mi haba.
If you want to be next, please say ani haba. I am next. Ani haba.
Ani haba.
Bachavod.
Not to crossbreed different species of animals, as Leviticus 19:19 states. Do not crossbreed your livestock with other species. Mi haba.
Anyone who would like to read, please say ani, I, haba. The next. Ani haba. Don't pass up your opportunity to practice the language of the prophets. Come on, you guys. Ani haba. I am next.
I see some others that are unable to read today. So
Okay. No
why
problem. I'll
don't
read in order
Heather
to give, I'll give some
and
variation.
sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. Restrictive commandment 219, not to work with two different species of animals together, that is, at the same time. As Deuteronomy 22, verse 10 states, do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. And we know, as is common in the Torah, that these are just archetypes for common circumstances at the time that the Torah was given. Mi haba,
Ani haba'a.
b'chavod.
Not to muzzle an ox while it is working with produce from which it would eat and derive benefit, as Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 4 states, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading grain. Mi haba.
Kol hakavod,
Ani haba.
b'chavod.
Not to cultivate the land in the 7th year, as Leviticus 25:4 states, do not sow your field. Mi haba.
Ani haba. Not to cultivate trees in the 7th year, as Leviticus continues. Do not prune your vineyard. Miswa haba'a. Next commandment. Miswa haba'a.
Not to reap crops that grow on their own in the 7th year in the same manner as in an ordinary year. As Leviticus chapter 25, verse 5 states, do not reap the crops of your harvest that grow on their own.
Now
Mi
you can
haba.
say miswa haba'a. Next commandment.
Miswa haba'a.
Ur Sheli
Hey,
224.
Habibi. High five.
Not to reap fruit that grows on trees in the 7th year in the same manner as in an ordinary year. As in the same manner, question mark, as Leviticus continues, and do not gather the grape of your vines from which you must abstain.
And the prophet
Claire.
said,
Miswa haba'a.
all right.
In the ordinary way, can you quickly touch that? In the
Go
same
ahead.
manner as an ordinary year.
Not to reap fruit that grows on trees in the 7th year in the same manner as in an ordinary year. As Leviticus continues, and do not gather the grapes of your vineyards from which you must abstain. So that's because you can gather fruit in the 7th year, even though we're letting the land rest. But there are limits on how you do it, okay? And not everybody can do it, but even those who can do it, they're not supposed to do it in a way as if like they're gathering all of the produce. It's just because it says, for example, that whoever's hungry, or whoever is permitted to take, that they can therefore just go out with a massive, uh, what do you call it, pickup truck and just fill the back of his pickup truck. So we have to learn uh, the classical explanation that we inherited from the ancient sages of Israel. What are the limitations, right? But that's the general idea. It's not a free-for-all.
Right. So instead of a big harvest with lugs and sickles and tools,
Yeah,
you can go eat your cluster of grapes off of the
right. It's not
plant.
just that the owner of the field can't harvest it. Nobody can harvest it in that sort of a manner, right? And there are limits to it. All right. So, tur sheni. Not to do agricultural work, whether with land or trees, in the Jubilee year, Hayovel, Shanat Hayovel. As Leviticus chapter 25, verse 11 states, do not sow. Tur shelmi, turn of who? Tur, turn shel of me. Tur shelmi,
Tur shali.
b'chavod.
Not to reap crops that grow on their own in the Jubilee year in the same manner as in an ordinary year. As Leviticus states, do not harvest the crops which grow on their own.
Right? Again, harvest. It's not saying you can't eat. It's saying don't harvest. So these have specific connotations. All right. And what do you say? What does the prophetess declare?
Miswa haba'ah.
Tur Sheli. 227, not to reap the fruit of the Jubilee year in the same manner as in an ordinary year, as Leviticus continues. Do not gather the grapes of your vines from which you must abstain. Didn't I already read this one?
Come again?
Didn't I just read this one?
It was slightly different.
I see.
Yeah. And now you can ask, whose turn is it? Shel mi hatur. Shel mi, of who? Hatur, the turn. Shel mi hatur.
Shel mi hatur.
Hatur hu sheli. The turn is mine. Hatur hu sheli. Not to sell a field in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, in perpetuity. That means not to sell a land forever, to be someone's forever. As Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23 states, do not make a permanent sale of the land. And this should have practical applications to a proper Jewish government, even in the modern era, even if we do not have a temple standing or a great Sanhedrin. This has implications to a righteous government, right? And just because perhaps as a body the government doesn't always make appropriate policies doesn't mean that everyone who is active in the government is sharing in that sin, right? You don't abandon your family just because there are family problems. Miswahaba'a, mihaba batur.
Ani haba'ah.
All right, how about you tell us I am the next in line? Ani haba'a batur.
Batur.
All right, one more time.
Ani haba'ah batur.
Perfect. Slowly but surely, we're going to build up this vocabulary and your confidence. B'chavod. Go right ahead. B'chavod.
Not to change the purpose of the open areas and fields granted to the Levites, as Leviticus chapter 25, verse 34 states, the fields of the open areas surrounding their cities shall not be sold. According to the oral tradition, we have learned that this verse is a prohibition against changing the purpose for which these lands are used.
All right. And you can ask, who is next in line? Mi ha ba ba tur. Mi ha ba batur.
Mi haba batur.
Right. Whoever wants to reply can say ani haba
Ani
batur.
haba batur.
Yeah, ba is in the. Ani haba batur. One more time.
Ani haba batur.
Perfect. Perfect. B'chavod.
Not to forsake the Levites, as Deuteronomy 12:19 states, be very careful not to abandon the Levite. Rather, we must give them the portions they are due and rejoice with them on each of the festivals.
Right? And we see a common theme here that the Almighty, in the giving of his wise commandments, has established various opportunities for the regular folk of the nation, and indeed people of all nations, for he declares this house, a house of prayer for all nations, that they will have proximity to the greatest scholars of the people of Israel and of humanity, the Khatahillah, in an ideal circumstance, in an ideal situation. Right? So there is not an apartheid of the wise priestly class from the regular folk, but rather it's not that there is no distinction. There's certainly distinction, but not a separation of social interaction, so long as the interaction is with respect, right? And so the festivals are a beautiful example of that, and it is a way in which the Torah, God's wise guidance, will go out from Jerusalem into the ends of the earth, not intended to be a lamp hidden under a basket, as it were, right? But rather, it's intended to be shared with the entire world and not just held as a treasure that one keeps to himself. All right, so that concludes the reading of the terse review of the 613 everlasting components of God's everlasting covenant with his people Israel. Now we are going to Sefer HaMisworth. Mr. Victor, Maze Sefer HaMisworth. Maze, what is this? Maze Sefer HaMisworth.
This is slightly expanded 1 or 2 paragraphs of what we were just reading, which was very concise. This is expanding a little bit.
Okay. And we're only going to read one such. We're not going to go through all of them unless it's, really, really terse, then we might do one or two. Bachavod, tur shalcha. Your turn. Tur shalcha.
This is that the priests were commanded to become impure for the relatives that are mentioned in the Torah, since on account of Scripture preventing them from becoming impure for their glory, yet allowing them to become impure for their relatives, they perhaps would think that the option is theirs. If they want to become impure, they become impure. If they do not want, they do not become impure. Hence, he made a decree upon them and made it obligatory upon them. And that is his, may he be exalted and may his name be blessed, saying, for her he shall defile himself. Leviticus 21:3.
That
This
is
is
to
to
say,
that is to say, for his sister. And the language of the Sifra, Imor section 212, is, for her he shall defile himself. It is a commandment. If he does not want to become impure, we force him to become impure. And it happened with Joseph, the priest, whose wife died on the eve of Pesach, and he did not wish to become impure for her, but the sages pushed him and made him do so against his will. And this is actually the commandment of mourning, meaning that an Israelite is obligated to mourn for his relatives. That is, the 6 dead relations about which he is commanded.
the 6 dead
And
relatives would probably be a better, expounding there.
Okay. And to strengthen this obligation, he explained it with a priest for whom impurity is prohibited, that he must become impure regardless, so that the law of mourning not be uprooted. And it has already been explained that the obligation of mourning is a positive commandment, however, only on the first day, whereas the rest is rabbinic. And in the explanation, they said in Moed Katan 14b, he does not observe mourning on the festival. If the mourning is from before, the positive commandment of the many pushes off the positive commandment of an individual. Behold, it has been made clear to you that the obligation of mourning is a positive commandment, however, only on the first day, whereas the rest is rabbinic. And even a priest is obligated to observe mourning on the first day and become impure for his relatives. Understand this, and the regulations of the commandment have already been explained in Tractate Berchot, in Ketuvot, and the Sifra, Parashat Emor, and Emor, and women are not obligated in this. That one be obligated to become impure for one's relatives. For the one that is prohibited from becoming impure for others besides the relatives is also the one who is commanded to become impure for the relatives. Whereas women of the priestly order who were not prohibited from becoming impure with a corpse, as will be explained in its place, Sefer HaMitzvot, Negative Commandments 166, were likewise not commanded to become impure, but they do practice mourning and are permitted to become impure. And know this, see Parshat Emor,
Yeah.
Mishneh Torah, Morning 1.
Yeah, fair. Kol hakavod. That was a lengthy one.
Mhm.
All right. This Miswa teaches us a very, very important universal principle of Torah and just human behavior in general. Does anything come to mind to anyone who was listening to that? Any universal principles that may be gleaned from it?
Well, the
Well,
obvious is
go ahead.
the obvious is obviously it's a positive commandment to mourn, and there's a requirement to become impure. In other words, to become corpse contaminated.
Okay, so what can we learn from that may be applicable broadly over the entire system of Torah?
Well, to me, that means most everyone is contaminated, but I'm not sure what point you're looking at.
All right, let's think beyond contamination. What's going on in the commandment is that you have a general protocol that is being cast aside by a greater duty. So that's teaching us that there is a priority of matters in the observance of Torah. There is a concept of certain commandments, whether prohibitions or positive commandments, whether restrictions or proactive duties. There is a order in which one gives into the other, where one commandment, whether positive or a prohibition, must bow down or give way to a greater priority, to a greater pressing matter. And this is a system of priority. I think it's not always black and white. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's unanimously agreed upon among the great scholars of the people of Israel. Sometimes it's not black and white, especially when we encounter scenarios that aren't explicitly discussed in the ancient Jewish sources. But the principle is certainly there and is certainly acknowledged. And here we have one such example with regard to a explicit commandment by God in the Torah. Right? But that's an important matter. A classic example that's pretty widely known and agreed upon is violating explicit Torah prohibitions in order to save a life on the Sabbath. That's just one example, right? There are examples that can be practical, very relevant any day of the week for any person. There are other examples that may not be so apparent to everybody and may not be applicable to everybody, but could be applicable to specific people, right? Such as an individual who is suffering from a certain ailment or a certain nutrient deficiency that could cause them great suffering or long-term damage or, heaven forbid, even death, unless he partake of a particular substance, let's say pig, for example, just giving an example because it's like an archetype of forbidden substances. And if he doesn't eat of it, he may die. In that case, what should he do? Is he being a big tzaddik? Is he being a big saint if he refuses to eat of the pig just because it's a Torah prohibition, but not partaking of it would lead to his inevitable death and the negligence of the family that he's commanded to support and defend? What takes priority? Is he going to be the saint? Is he going to be the praiseworthy servant of God if he allows his family to be given over to the uncertainty of life because he chose to die rather than uphold the divine obligation to protect them, even though that means he will need to eat a pig? Again, just an archetype, just an example. Or will he be the saint if he eats the pig, not because he delights in eating it, but for the sake of God's commandments?
He would
Will he be
guilty.
wicked? Will he be wicked if he refuses to eat the pig?
Well, will he be guilty of one of the 10 commands? Murder,
Potentially.
potentially.
That applies to yourself.
Right. Yes. Yeah. If you don't save your own life, you could be guilty of murder.
Right. Yeah. It may be inadvertent. It may be
Sure.
like manslaughter, but it's forbidden. That's included in the prohibition. Absolutely. All right. Yalla, bo namshich. That's a can of worms that could go on for a long time. It's interesting, but it's not the topic of today. So today is, drum roll, please, Pesach Hebrew. Pesach Hebrew. Hebrew for Passover.
Explain why we have a dot under the H.
Is to let you know that unlike in English, where the letter H, when it's not followed by a vowel, does not represent a consonant, right? And for everybody listening who may be a little rusty on their elementary phonics, vowels are the sounds represented in English by the letters A, E, I, O, and U. A, E, I, O, U. And consonants are all other sounds. We're keeping it simple. We could go into more detail. So in English, generally, well, I don't think there's a single exception. And please speak up if you guys know of an exception. I don't think there is. In English, when we write words, if H is the final letter in the word, it is always simply indicating a vowel and potentially also indicating the inflection, which part of the word should be accented. But the H at the end of a word in English never is pronounced as a consonant. Okay, even though H is generally speaking a consonant, it makes a h sound. But when it's the final letter in a word, it is not making a h sound. That means if we ignore this dot here, the average native English speaker would read this as pesa, pesa. They would not be pronouncing the H as a consonant. They'd just be understanding it as an indication that the accent's on the last part of the word, pesa. The dot is here to let us know that this H is not just serving to let you know which part of the word to accent. It's not just serving to let you know what kind of vowels at the end of the word. The dot is here to let us know that here it is in fact a consonant and it's representing the Hebrew letter het. Why don't we just put a CH? Well, no transliteration is perfect. Every transliteration has its trade-off and its advantages. I'm of the opinion, as most academics are, that if a person is serious about studying Hebrew, there's a greater advantage to not transliterate as a CH. The CH transliteration of the Hebrew letter het is not used by the mainstream academic establishment, nor is it used by the Sephardic, the non-Ashkenazi establishment. The CH is popular in the English-speaking world because Jews of European heritage are the mainstream in the English-speaking Jewish world. And we're talking about non-academic world, but that is the majority of the Jewish world. And they use CH, even though that can easily confuse native English speakers who aren't part of their community. They use the CH because in German, that has represented the sound. And Ashkenazi Jewish, European Jewish tradition, as it is practiced at least in the last few centuries, has been to pronounce the letter het exactly the same as the letter chaf. And since ch represented the cha sound of chaf, they use it also for het. What this dot does is let us know that this is the letter het definitively. So you can see in the transliteration that this is definitively the letter het, and it will not be confused with the letter chaf. We use a K with a line under it, or a KH to represent chaf, and an H with a dot under it, sometimes an H with a line under it to represent het. All right? Pesach, Pesach. Pesach Hebrew, Passover Hebrew. Pesach means to skip. Oh, and it's making everything. Yeah, we have a problem with our. That's a shame. We have a problem with our view, and it wasn't doing this any time before. So I've noticed it when in PDFs when we would show it, but never when I'm sharing my screen. That's unusual.
I think it has something to do with
The
the
background on
settings
my.
on your computer. Maybe you have it in some sort of dark mode or something.
Yeah,
Because I've
yeah, I
noticed
do. I
the
do.
design will look different on my computer than it looks when you present it to.
Yeah, I do have it on dark mode, but every single time in the past, despite it looking different in PDF form, but when I would make it larger, it would stay the way we've always been able to see it.
Right.
That's a shame. What am I gonna do? Hmm. don't know how to get around this.
I can pop over here and maybe change the font color in the background as quickly as I can.
Okay. There is a
Oh,
way that it can.
you'll have to send me a link though, because I don't have it.
Okay.
Can you
There is a.
WhatsApp it to me?
Yeah. Let me think real fast.
Is this an issue on each slide or just this first one?
I think it's each one, and it's never done this to me before. Yeah. So I'm gonna click here.
I think if you exit this out and then hit share in the upper right
Oh,
and then copy link.
I guess it'd be a good time to go to commercial.
no. This is a good time to do the questions because we were also going to do question and answer.
Well, I was going to say we're on YouTube now, and if you haven't already, if you could like it, a little thumb, give it a thumbs up. You can share it, let people know that we're over here, and of course, subscribe if you haven't already.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So Pesach falls, I believe it starts on Saturday night. Sunday will also be what was the first day essentially, and then Monday as well. It's an observed day. So my question is, do we keep? It's like a Sabbath day, but is it in every aspect? Meaning no work, no lights, no none of the other stuff, except I believe cooking is permitted on, for example, on Sunday, or is it not?
Excellent question. Let's break it up into two parts. Your first question is it like the Sabbath in every, like a weekday Sabbath in every respect? And the answer to that is no. It is in many respects like a weekday Sabbath, but certainly not in every respect. So generally speaking, all of the restrictions on malachot, prohibited creative activity, put it simply, that are restricted on the Sabbath are also restricted on the biblically mandated, the divine, not biblically, the Torah divine holidays, those holidays that are directly commanded by God, as opposed to Purim, for example, which is not directly commanded by God. So all of those malachot, all those forbidden activities that are considered Torah derived are forbidden also on the divinely commanded holidays, with the exception of Rosh Chodesh, okay, with the exception of the new moon. But when it comes to Passover, when it comes to Shavuot, when it comes to Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, all of these are like Shabbat, except with regard to the penalties for their violation, and also except with regard to carrying or transferring, okay, from one domain to another, and except with regard to cooking. And not only is it that cooking is allowed, but everything necessary for the cooking is allowed. That means even slaughter. So whereas you certainly cannot slaughter an animal on a regular weekday, Shabbat, but you can slaughter an animal on the holy day itself. The reason is, I mean, this is not the only reason, but one of the reasons is because it's the rejoicing in that holiday is a major component of its observance, and that's part of the joy of that holiday is fresh meat for avid meat eaters. I mean, those among us who may not be big connoisseurs of meat may not understand that, but that's part of the idea. It's not the only idea, right? A malacha doesn't become permitted just because a forbidden activity doesn't become permitted just because I like it, but it does happen to be that it's permitted as part of the necessary component of cooking what you would like to eat on the Yom Tov. And these biblical Torah mandated holidays are often called and normally called in rabbinic lingo Yom Tov, just that everybody know Yom Tov. That literally means a good day, and you can have a good day any day of the week, of course, but it's important that we know the terminology. So the term Yom Tov, good day, is used in rabbinic Hebrew specifically to refer to the divinely commanded holy days, with the exception of the new moon, right? And that's as opposed to a rabbinic established holidays, and all the more so as opposed to non-rabbinically mandated holidays, like secular holidays, even though it might be a good day, but we don't call it in a legal context, we don't call it a Yom Tov. So that's one of the ways you can refer to the explicitly commanded holidays that are explicitly commanded by God. They get referred to as Yom Tov. So everybody say that. You can write it down. Y-O-M, Yom, that means day, and T-O-V is good. Day
Yom
good.
Tov. Yom
Day
Tov.
good. Okay. Not
Clarification.
good day.
And everything you said sounds perfectly right, but I'm curious if everyone understands that Shabbat is actually a higher day than a Yom Tov
Yes,
and takes precedence.
absolutely.
So the cooking of Saturday night's Passover meal is to be done prior to the evening.
So yeah, absolutely. There is a important distinction also to be made with regard to fire. We're not allowed to kindle a fire on Yom Tov. That means whether it's the first and last day of Passover from the Torah, right? Or whether it's Shavuot, Pentecost, whether it's Sukkot, whether it's Yom Teruah or Rosh Hashanah, or whether it's Yom Kippurim. We're not allowed to kindle a fire. However, unlike on Shabbat, we can transfer a flame. Okay? And you can also, unlike Shabbat, you can cook with a flame and heat derived from a flame on Yom Tov. That includes on Passover. And when we say Passover, we're not talking about the entirety of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're talking about specifically the first and the last days. Okay, the first
Is
day
this
and last day
where
from the Torah.
long burning candles come into play?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you explain
Absolutely.
that quickly?
Because you can still, so on Shabbat, people usually use a candle at the beginning, and the purpose of that is fundamentally different from the purpose of the Yom Tov candle that you may be familiar with. On Shabbat, the purpose of the candle that's lit before Shabbat, that should be lit before sunset, is in order that there be an atmosphere of joy in the house, that people not be sitting around in dark, because historically they didn't have electrical appliances, electrical light fixtures. It's funny how when you rub your nose, it kind of transfers like a yawn. That's so funny.
I promise not to pick my nose. Okay.
I don't promise, but I won't do it. I'm just kidding. I will cut. I will wash my hand. So, what were we talking about? So on
Transfer
Shabbat,
candles.
on Shabbat, you can't kindle a fire. You can't cook with a fire. So even if the flame is already lit before Shabbat, you're not allowed, it's considered a violation of the Torah. You're not allowed to cook with a fire or heat that's derived from a flame fire.
How do you say that you're not allowed to benefit from that particular flame, the Shabbat
Benefit
flame?
is not a good word to use because we do benefit from it. We're not allowed to cook
outside
from
of looking at it, and and any other way.
How would you don't? It's not good to use the word benefit. You can't cook with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's more than one thing you can do with a flame aside from cooking. You can benefit from it in that you just enjoy its light. You can benefit from it in that you can use it to know where to get around in your house.
You can carry it around.
No.
That's what I meant. Okay.
Okay. You can benefit from it in that it's causing warmth,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, you shouldn't move it around That's true. That's not a Torah prohibition. That's not a Torah restriction. From the Torah, you're allowed to move a flame around on Shabbat. By rabbinic decree, we're not allowed to move it around. Right? And again, that's anyway. So that's on Shabbat. On Yom Tov, such as the first and last days of Passover, you can move a flame around. Okay? We're not supposed to make we're not supposed to, although you can cook, we're supposed to do what's called you have to make a certain, it's called Eruv Tavshilin, but this is too nuanced to go into it right now. But an Eruv Tavshilin is something that was created by rabbinic decree in order to help us keep in mind certain important principles when it comes to cooking on Yom Tov. So, for example, although cooking is allowed on Yom Tov, i.e. the first and last days of Passover, although cooking is allowed, and it's encouraged because people like to eat fresh food, but this isn't a license to be cooking more than you know you will need intentionally, right? If you cook more than you need by happenstance, it's not an issue. That's fine. But we're not to cook more than we know we will need and thereby end up cooking and doing things on Yom Tov for days that are not Yom Tov, right? So even though you can cook on the first day of Passover, that's not a license to be cooking in preparation for the weekday, right?
Yeah. Now on the Friday, cook all you want. That's fine. You can cook for the week, I guess. But the meal should be more set apart.
Yeah,
is that right?
Definitely. Now also on Shabbat, it's important to note, and frankly, the majority of rabbis do not know this somehow. I don't know. But it states explicitly in the words of our sages and the Talmudic literature and in the codes of Jewish law, in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishneh Torah. It's very clear that the Torah prohibition of cooking is not broad. It's not broad, it's specific. It's specific to cooking with a flame of actual fire or heat derived from fire. That's with regard to the Torah prohibition of cooking. And the Torah prohibition of cooking with a fire or heat derived from a fire is specific. It's also limited to cooking with fire or heat derived from a fire, something that is eaten cooked and the cooking was not already done. If you're cooking with fire or heat derived from a fire on Shabbat, but that thing was already cooked, that's different in terms of the penalty, in terms of the violation. That's different from cooking something with fire that was not already cooked and you only eat it cooked, right? And that's also different from cooking something over a flame that was already cooked, but cooking it more isn't going to make it any better. I.e., in English, in modern English, we'd call that just heating it up. So just heating something up that was already cooked is not the same in terms of violation. Even on Shabbat, we're saying. And that's not to say you can heat things up with a fire, but the prohibitions are different. Simply heating something up with a flame on Shabbat, if it was already cooked, and the heating it up doesn't make it even more tasty, it's just making it warm and you don't want to eat it cold, right? That is not a Torah violation, even though it's prohibited. It's prohibited by rabbinic decree. These are things that for somehow it just escapes the mainstream establishment, even though they read it in the text. But in practice, I hear people talking for the last 22, 23, 24 years. And it's like they read it in the text, and then when they communicate, it just flew out the window. There is no universal prohibition of cooking in the broadest sense of the term on Shabbat. So number one is specifically with fire or heat derived from a fire. And number two, it doesn't include simply warming something up. But the go ahead.
An item that's going to be cooked is first raw and then it becomes cooked. So it's kind of impossible to cook what has been cooked. It's already cooked.
Correct.
But you're saying you can
In colloquial terminology,
You
that
could
might be
throw
called
some
cooking.
sauce in there and freshen it up and make it tastier, which is
The sauce is
prohibited
also already cooked, usually.
if it's already
Right,
cooked. Yeah, yeah.
right. This is not licensed to just be doing this kind of a thing. I'm just saying it because if we don't make this distinction, then we're adding to the Torah. And that's what people are often doing, not on purpose, but they're adding to the Torah.
Sure.
So there are rabbinic restrictions on cooking, even if it's just heating up. But this is only with regard to a flame and heat derived from a flame. What has happened is that in modern times, the Orthodox establishment, especially the ultra-Orthodox establishment, have expanded this beyond just heating up with a flame or heat derived from a flame. They've expanded it to any sort of heating up, and that didn't exist. That didn't exist in the prohibitions of the sages. They didn't.
Some will eat cold, is what you're saying. They don't use a black or
No,
some
no,
a
no, no.
warming.
They will, but it has to
Yeah.
have already been activated before Shabbat.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of conflating between different sources of heat and fire.
So
Okay?
the law is clear that we're talking about a flame. Today,
Yes,
we
very
don't
clear.
cook with flame
Well, people do
generally.
still cook with a flame.
Some
It's
have
just that
gas stoves. Yeah.
we have a lot of readily available ways of heating things up other than flames, but we use both. So, however, one might say, okay, that's just because they didn't know that there was any other way to heat things up. That's not true. They talk about it explicitly in classical Jewish rabbinic literature. They talk about alternative ways of heating things up on Shabbat other than with a flame. They were
Like
well
hot
aware.
stones or something.
Hot stones that were not heated up by a flame. A hot stone that is heated up in its source of heat with a flame, but the flame is not gone and it's still hot, that's still considered a Torah prohibition of cooking with it. Okay? But you could have a stone that's heated up super hot from the sun. You could have a stone that's heated up really hot from a hot spring. And the sages of Israel talk about this in ancient Jewish literature. That is not a Torah prohibition. And they made a
Interesting.
rabbinic restriction on it. And even the rabbinic restriction is limited. Okay, we won't go too much into it, but suffice it to say, anyone who talks about a blanket prohibition of all types of cooking, even heating up something that was already completely cooked, that's sort of cooked to all that was necessary, is someone who either doesn't know what he's talking about, or if he does know what he's talking about, he's not telling you everything, and he's making your life harder than it needs to be. Right? It might get flack for that, but so what? We should care more about not adding to the Torah and not ostracizing people and pushing them away from God's word than placating the big heads in the establishment, i.e., the kosher mafia, right?
Not calling something prohibited that
Exactly. It's
is
a violation
permitted.
of Torah, what they're doing. It is possible to violate Torah by being overly religious, by being strict is not always being right. Being strict is not always what's kosher. Being strict is not always what's orthodox. Being strict can be heretical, even. If your strictness is adding to God's Torah and you're saying this is equal to God's Torah, that's heresy. Being strict is not the parameter of truth. That's a big mistake that a lot of people make. We have to be cautious.
There's no problem with being strict if you're just saying, "Oh, we're just being strict. We're not equating this
If you
to the
admit
word
you're
of
being strict on the side
yeah,
of caution because you're unsure,
yeah,
or you're being strict because of personal preference and you acknowledge that, or being strict because of community protocol, maybe you don't even agree with it, but for the sake of peace. All these are different from being
Flaming is
strict,
what God commands is
right?
the issue. Yeah.
When you know or should know that it's not what he commanded. And God forgive us from sins of ignorance. All right. I'm just curious, Heather, how are we doing on the slides?
All fixed.
I think it's all fixed.
Really?
I think.
You are the bomb. At least it's manageable and not embarrassing, right?
Well, you'll have to
God
check
bless
and make
you.
sure that
All right,
it's
let me see.
actually doing what it's supposed to.
Bonir Guys, Rat Hashem. Oh, wow. Look at that. Look. Are you looking for a volunteer job?
She's kind of a keeper. She's kind of a
Wow.
keeper. And we do have a question in the chat there as well, if you want to kind of a homemade blech.
Okay, 1 second. You want to read the question for us?
Yes. I have a gas stove that I light the back burner before Shabbat. Then I place a cookie sheet over it and it stays on low for all of Shabbat. If I have leftovers to eat, I take it out of the fridge and put it on the cookie sheet to warm it. Is this okay since the food was cooked before Shabbat?
Excellent question. There's actually more than one opinion about that in the establishment, but your blech, I got a basic question for you. What is our general principle when we know no better? Or when the sages of Israel did not speak about something? What is the general principle with regard to what is a Torah or concerning what may or may not be a Torah prohibition, as opposed to something that may or may not be a rabbinic prohibition? What is the principle? And this is a principle that we do know from the sages of ancient Israel. What is the principle? Anybody who knows, please speak up.
Like you say, we need to be strict if it's a Torah prohibition, and we
Or
are lenient,
a doubt, if we have a doubt
or a
about it.
doubt, yeah, or lenient if it's the other way around.
All right, and is it that you should, that you can be, or that you should be?
You should be if there's doubt, if there's not clarity on what it should be.
Excellent, excellent. All right. So I want someone to try to apply that to the question. I can tell you, but it's better that we learn how to think independently. Not that we be every man for himself, but people don't always have access to a Torah scholar to ask. So we should become Torah scholars, men and women alike, if it's within your ability. And for most of us in this modern era, it is. So how would we apply that?
You could take a
Right?
stab, but I could say since the flame is already going, you're not starting a new flame to benefit from it, and the thing is already hot. You put in the food on it that is already cooked. I would say that's probably okay.
And also another question, what is a blech? She asked about a blech, and that's a common term in the English-speaking Jewish world. What is a blech? Can someone define that for us?
It's like a warming tray,
Okay,
some
is it
low
over a
heat.
campfire? Is it over a campfire? What is it?
In this case, it's over a gas stove that's on very low, that's kept
Okay,
on.
so if it's over an actual flame, then it has to be treated with regard to the concerning the laws for actual flames. Okay, what if it's over an electrical heater of some sort? You know, like an electrical element, like an electric stove or something like that. Is that a Torah prohibition?
No, that one it's not an actual flame causing the heat. It's electrical element.
So unless we think that electricity is synonymous with fire, yes, I know electricity can start a fire. Electricity can certainly start a fire. So can a magnifying glass. A magnifying glass isn't fire. Just because two things look the same doesn't mean they are the same. A stick can also start a fire. Electricity is not fire. If it were fire, there's electricity flowing through your walls right now. If it were fire, the insulation covering the wire would melt and your house would go up in flames. If it were fire, you put a uh, electric light in a vacuum, which it usually is in a vacuum, it should not produce light because fire does not produce light in a vacuum. It's literally the opposite of fire. You introduce oxygen into that vacuum and it usually goes out. Whereas with fire, you put it in a vacuum, you remove the oxygen and it goes out. So they're behaving oppositely. Also, the sages of Israel, this isn't only modern application with modern knowledge. Somehow, I don't know how, somehow the sages of ancient Israel knew that the sun is not actually fire. I don't know how they knew that, but they did. And that's why they didn't consider it a Torah prohibition to cook with the sun. You could actually cook with the sun, barring the rabbinic restriction from doing so. You could cook with the sun, and it wouldn't be a Torah violation on Shabbat. That's according to the sages
Reheat
of
or
ancient.
cook?
Cook.
Cook.
Cooking that is prohibited is only with fire. This is what people need to understand. It's not in their heads. It's not in the heads of the establishment. The Torah prohibition of cooking is cooking with fire or heat derived from fire. The sun is explicitly not regarded as fire with regard to this Torah prohibition in Talmudic literature. Interestingly, somehow they knew that, and today we know definitively that the sun is not fire. If it were, it would have burnt out instantly. There's no oxygen there. It's just plasma. It's
Frequency, basically.
ultra heated gas. Also, with the hot springs of Tiberia, the sages of Israel also treated it not as fire. And guess what? It's not fire. It's not even heated by fire. It's heated by magma. Just because magma glows and produces light does not mean it's fire. This is just a pervasive view in the Orthodox world that is simply based on ignorance and social pressure. That's it. Just because everybody is calling right left and left right doesn't mean they're right. Like the famous quote of Maimonides, the Rambam, if the entire world were to reject the truth, it wouldn't make the truth any less true. And if the entire world admits that the truth is truth, it doesn't become any more true than it already was. Right? So the Torah cannot be divorced from knowledge of reality. The same God who gave the Torah is the God who created the universe. So if we try to keep Torah while rejecting reality, that is, in a sense, a rejection of the Torah or the God who gave it. Right? So Torah goes hand in hand with knowledge of the universe. We cannot imagine that someone is or should not imagine that someone is a qualified Torah scholar if he's sticking his head in the sand with regard to acknowledgement of reality. That's a problem. It's a pervasive problem. Okay, so since we're already on the topic of random Passover questions, any other questions? Any topic Passover related?
Is there a specific times when we should be done cleaning or preparing, removing our chametz? And
Excellent.
when, I guess, yeah, times.
These are excellent questions, Emmanuel. Kol hakavod. And you guys don't let me forget before I get to his question. Somebody asked regarding paying bills, and I think how that relates financial difficulties in relation to Passover. Okay, so with regard to
that was with regard to buying an electric black.
Okay.
That so they're limited right now with what they have, which is
And that's
fire.
also that's the same scenario with regard to Passover foods, which can also break your bank. Emmanuel, would you mind stating your question one more time?
Yes, so we know the Pesach is coming, so are there specific times when we should be done removing matzah, when we should be done having the meals prepared, especially on it falls on Shabbat at the end of Shabbat? What are the time frames that we have to work with to begin to start and
All right. Excellent question. Number one, with regard to matzot, with regard to matzahs, the unleavened bread, you are not only allowed, but it's praiseworthy to to make fresh matzah during Passover. You do not have to already have your matzah all made for the entire holiday before the holiday starts. The idea that people are not allowed to make matzah in their own homes is a voluntarily accepted stringency that was taken upon themselves in the ultra-Orthodox world relatively recently. And I mean, seriously, like pretty darn recently. They didn't have this even possibility until the industrial era. Jews of all Jewish communities were making their own matzah, their own unleavened bread in their homes, in their communities for the last 3,000 years, right? Until modern conveniences arrived. With regard to getting rid of your hametz, with regard to getting rid of your leavened products, that should happen before the night of the 15th, right? Really, it's supposed to happen from the Torah by midday, before midday of the 14th of the first month, that is the month of Nisan in modern lingo, or post-exile lingo. By rabbinic decree, by the 6th hour, and these are what are called sha'ot zamaniyot, temporal hours. Can someone tell us what is a temporal hour in Hebrew? Sha'a zamanith. Sha'a zamanit. What is a temporal hour? How is that different from conventional hours? When the sages of Israel talk about hours, or you see any time in traditional Jewish literature reference to hours in the day in the context of halakha, what is that talking about? Is it talking about a 60-minute hour, a precise 60-minute hour? What is it talking about?
It fluctuates all through the year, actually, but it's based on splitting sunrise to sundown into 12 equal segments, which
Correct.
may be longer than 60, maybe less than 60.
Right, depending on the season and the time of the day in each season. That's right. Right, so at the 6th temporal hour of the day, by rabbinic decree, you should already have gotten rid of all your hametz, all of your hametz. If you have hametz that you sold, well, why are you concerned about it? It's not your hametz, right? It's not your leavened product, right? Just because it's in property that you are renting to someone doesn't mean it's yours. So you don't have to worry about that. The prohibition is only hametz, leavened products that may be in your possession, not on your property, but in your possession. You're not liable if your Catholic grandmother stops in your home and she's eating a cheeseburger and there's a cheeseburger in your home. You're not violating the Torah prohibition, right? In the same way that just because you're eating leavened bread in someone else's home doesn't mean that you're not violating the prohibition of having leavened products in your possession. Just because you're not at your home doesn't mean the leavened product is not in your possession. In your possession means your ownership, any domain of your ownership.
Question on that, so let's suppose I put the hametz on my trash can in my property. I can't really burn things where I live. So
Okay,
that is still part of my property. The
but
trash
it's
can
not
is outside.
yours. But it's not yours. If you throw it away
Okay.
in the manner that you throw away any other object that's usually in your trash can, it's no longer yours. That's what's called hefker,
Okay.
ownerless. If no one's upset if someone takes their trash and they just happen to not be the trash man, right? Right. If you're upset that someone took your trash, then it wasn't trash, and there's something wrong with you. You're upset not because they took your object, but because you hate the person that took it. That's so either you have animosity against the person who took it, and the issue wasn't really the object itself, or you didn't really relinquish your ownership of the object. Right? That's called hefker, something that's ownerless. Right? So it's okay that it's in your trash can. If you put it in your trash can because you didn't want the rain to get on it and you didn't want critters to eat it, but you have it in your trash can just to protect it and not with intent that it be taken away, then it's not ownerless. Just covering all my bases here. Okay, you could use the trash can in an atypical way. That's not what we're talking about, of course. You also asked about when. Okay, so it should be burned or just gotten rid of in any way. Generally, just in a general manner, this is usually called the burning of Hamas. Even if you're not burning it, it falls under that category of burning the Hamas in colloquial terminology, bi'ur Hamas. And because we cannot burn and do these things on Shabbat, and Shabbat is the day before Passover this year, that means we need to do this on Erev Shabbat, on the eve of Shabbat, that's Friday. So you need to burn all your Hamas by Friday. You can still have some bread left over for Hamosi, for the Shabbat meal in the morning, but that's on the condition that you have that meal before the 6th hour. Okay, and that's by rabbinic decree. By Torah decree, you need to finish it all by midday. That's midday, according to what? According to 24 hours of 60 minutes, or midday according to what?
The temple clock.
Right, that's called temporal hours. Temporal hours. In Hebrew, sha'a zamaniyat, or sha'ot zamaniyat. Yallah, any other questions before we move on to our Hebrew? No problem.
I saw
And if anybody,
something
go ahead. If anybody feels, yes, sir, go ahead.
in Facebook. What about creating a fence or guard, possibly because of the community at the time? This is probably several minutes ago, but I'm not entirely
And don't let me
sure.
forget about Deborah's question as well. Can you ask it one more time?
What about creating a fence or guard, possibly because of the community of the time?
They mean a metaphorical fence, an ideological fence, to distance us from some more severe violation. I'm not sure what they're referring to very specifically. Maybe they're talking about electric, heating up food with electricity, even though it's not technically fire. I'm not sure if that's what they're referring to, but that would be one such example. The general rule is that we have a commandment from the Torah to safeguard his safeguards. That is the language of the Torah, to safeguard his safeguards. That means that there is a precedent in the Torah itself that we don't haphazardly keep his commandments. As it says, if we walk haphazardly with God, then he will deal with us haphazardly according to the laws of nature and cause and effect. And we will have put ourselves outside of his special divine providence, divine protection, right? It's not a violation of his control of the world, but that's the paradigm that he created. That when we go outside his commandments, we go outside the promises and protections of his covenant. So there is protocol by direct commandment of God to set up safeguards, to safeguard his safeguards. But what safeguards are in place is dependent upon the sages of Israel, and it has universal authority over all the people of Israel and all who join themselves unto them, only when those safeguards are decreed, issued by the great Sanhedrin, the Supreme Council of the people of Israel, when it is located in the place that the Almighty chose. When it's not in the place that the Almighty chose, they have authority to the degree that we as a nation accept it. And that can vary from community to community. When it comes to issues that they never made decrees about, such as modern issues, there is no one single court or rabbi who has what we call halachic authority, legislative or judicial authority over the entire people of Israel. Any rabbi or court that imagines that they have such authority over the entire people of Israel, when the entire people of Israel have not accepted them as their universal authority. Such a person who's assumed that authority has essentially usurped the Torah and is a pariah in the people of Israel. And there are people like that. And many of these people do have their own followers. And it's fine that their followers follow them, except in the idea that they have made themselves the king of Israel without Israel having accepted them as king. That verges on heresy. Seriously. That doesn't mean that we should treat them badly. Most people who follow such dictators, essentially, people who follow them are usually very sincere people, but they're sincere people who are being duped by some of the most arrogant individuals in the world, and those are very dangerous people. They're people who, despite their scholarship, they may be true scholars, but are individuals who are sowing discord and baseless hatred instead of joining the people of Israel together, repairing the breaches and magnifying God's name in peace, with peace. As our sages said, we should be disciples of Aaron, the brother of Moses, pursuing peace and not sowing discord. Such people have no authority. No individual rabbi, neither myself nor the greatest scholar alive today, has independent authority to impose his personal opinion regarding what is the best way to safeguard God's commandments. He can suggest it. He can issue it to his community that has voluntarily accepted him as their guide, but he has no authority to impose it on the entire people of Israel, unless we accept him, or he succeeds to establish a great Sanhedrin, which is tantamount to being accepted by the entire people of Israel, right? Because there's a protocol for that. Okay, with regard to Deborah's question, a concern that many people have about keeping Torah and finances is not just with regard to Passover, it's with all sorts of things. Do I need 6, 9 sets of pans, pots, dishes, eating utensils? Am I a sinner if I'm not rich? Of course not. Of course not. If you have taken upon yourself a rabbi who is leading you in a path that you, in his methodology, are only able to be Torah observant and a decent human being, a decent God-fearing member of the covenant, only if you make a 6-figure salary, then I kindly suggest you find another rabbi. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be the rabbis that I like, but for your own sake and for the sake of the people of Israel, find another rabbi, because despite anti-Semitic cliches, the majority of the people of Israel, the majority of Jews in the world, even in New York, are not making 6-figure salaries. If you got to be rich in order to keep Torah, something ain't right. Somebody's living in a bubble, a financial bubble, and it's going to pop. Yalla, let's move on to Hebrew. Thank you so much, Heather, for helping us with this. Pesach Hebrew, Passover Hebrew. Okay, it doesn't look exactly like it looked when I made it, but beggars can't be choosers. It still looks pretty darn good given our circumstances. Thank you so much, Heather. Who would like to read? Mi roseh likro. Who wants to read? If you want to read, please say ani, I, roseh, want, likro, to read. I want to read. Ani roseh likro.
Adi Roseli Crow.
B'chavod. Kol hakavod.
Pesach Hebrew. In the merit of 4 things, Israel was redeemed from Egypt. They did not change their language.
Okay, that doesn't mean they didn't learn other languages. It means that they did not neglect their own language. Okay, they held on to their language. They didn't just simply become Egyptians, or in modern lingo, they didn't just simply become citizens of the world. Okay, they were citizens of the world, but they were not simply that. They held on to their identity. All right, so here we have the 2 standard words used for language in Hebrew. Lashon, and Safa. So you can read it together. Hector, Hector, I'm just going to let it go. Heather, this time it's Heather. I don't want to get hurt here. Heather, would you like to read? Read our 2 words for language, the 2 ways you say language. Everybody, please have a pen and paper or pencil handy. Take notes. How do we say language in Hebrew? What are the 2 ways?
Lashon and Safa.
Beautiful. And what are the differences in the literal meaning? Just do number 1. What does lashon literally mean?
Tongue.
Very good. Do we have a person for tribute for number 2? Say the word and tell us what it literally means.
Safad. Wow.
All
I
right,
don't
so
know what
lashon means tongue.
Yeah.
Lashon literally means tongue, and that's a regular way of saying language. Just like in English language, if you spoke a Latin-based language, you would hear the connection to tongue. Language is from lingua, the tongue. Right? So Hebrew operates similar to English. And if lashon is tongue, what might be another term for language? Safa. Maze safa. What is safa literally?
Idiom, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, both of these are idioms. Safa is a lip, a lip. So if you learn how to say language in Hebrew, you've learned more than 1 word, because these are both used in regular Hebrew, both biblical and modern, for tongue and lip, and simultaneously for language. As it says at the beginning of the reciting the Amidah, the central daily prayer, we state the psalm that says, "O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise." Adonai, Safa, Thai, Tiftah. O eternal, my lips open. Adonai, Safotai, Tiftah. Okay. Mi haba batur, mi rotse likro. Who is next? Who would like to read? Mi rose likro. Please say, Ani rose likro, and then read. If you're a woman, you can say Ani rosa. Ani rosa likro. Ani rosa likro for a woman. Ani rotse likro for a man.
Ani rosa zikro.
All right, likro, likro. Ani rotsa likro. One more time. Ani rotsa likro.
Can you say it again?
Sure. Which word?
I had it written down as rosa, but is there an L in it? I thought I heard.
Rotsa. No
Okay.
L. And then the last one is likro. There is an
Okay,
L in the
likro.
last one.
Okay,
The L sound means 2, like to read. Likro. Ani rotsa likro.
there we go. Ani rosa likro.
Beautiful.
Ramban Gamaliel that anyone who did not say these 3 things did not fulfill his obligation.
Okay. We say them together. Passover, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. Everybody say it together. You say it with me. Passover, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. Let's read them in Hebrew. Pesach, Masa, Maror. One more time, everybody say it together. Pesach, Masa, Maror. We can do it in pop pronunciation. Pesach, Matzah, Maror. Pesach, Matzah, Maror. Pesach, Masa, Maror. Okay. Do we have a volunteer? Tur
Ani
Sheli.
rosa lichro.
Okay, now I'll give you a pass for Yemenite Hebrew. In Yemenite Hebrew, they pronounce the segol, the 3-dot vowel, as an ah. So rosa is actually masculine in Yemenite Hebrew, whereas in modern Hebrew it's feminine because of the variation of the vowels. But in modern Hebrew, it would be rose, rose, rose. So
Thanks
ani
for the
rose.
pass.
All right, one
I
more
think
time.
I wrote
Ani
it down
rotse
that way
likro.
first time. Ani rose likro.
Beautiful. All right, so let's
Pesach.
read through it. Pesach, Passover. Tell me what they mean. Say it in Hebrew and tell me what it means.
Pesach is Passover. Masur, Masa, rather. Matzah, or
All right.
the, yep.
If you see
And
an S with a dot under it, that lets you know that it's a Saudi instead of a Sin or Samech, and this is a mistake. There should be no dot under Pesach here, but here there should be.
matzah and maror
Very
is
good.
bitter herb.
That's right. So let's say it one more time, read it, and tell us what it means. And it's best, the quicker you guys can transition to reading the Hebrew instead of relying on the transliteration, the less you have to worry about Yosef's little typos. Or any other inconveniences of transliterations. Trust me, there are a lot in any method of transliterating. There is a lot of confusion. This one actually is more clear, even with a mistake, than the mainstream translations. Let's read through it one more time. Go ahead.
Sticking with the Hebrew letters here.
Yes, sir.
Pesach,
What does it mean?
Passover. Matzah is the matzah. It seems
What
like
is
the
that?
same word. Unleavened bread, thank you. And maror is the bitter herb.
Very good. And can you tell us what is the little symbol over certain vowels here? What does that mean?
The little slash would be the where you have the emphasis or
Yes. It's the part of the
accent.
word that gets accented. It's the syllable that gets accented.
Pesach,
Pesach, Pesach. Masa,
Masa,
Masa. That's right. Maror.
Marur. Mhm.
All right, roar like a lion. Yalla. Pesach, Masa, Maror. All right. Mirotse likro. Mirotse likro, and that's an O at the end. Mirotse likro. Who wants to read?
Ani, is that me or Ani? I can't remember.
Ani, accent on the final syllable.
Okay.
Ani.
Ani Rotzeli Crow.
Beautiful.
Rabban Gamaliel will say, anyone who did not say these three matters on Passover has not fulfilled his obligations. The Paschal lamb, matzah, and bitter herbs. Pesach, because of the Almighty Passover. Pesach.
Pasach. That's the verb.
Pasach.
He
Oh,
passed over.
Pasach.
Pasach.
Yeah. Over the houses of the forefathers in Egypt, as it is stated, that you shall say it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Paschal offering, for he passed over.
Okay,
Exodus
so
12:27.
beautiful. Tizkura mitzvot. So Pesach is the word that's getting translated as Passover, but it's also the same exact word used in reference to the Passover offering. And it literally means to skip over. So both the holiday Pesach and also the offering of Pesach are all reminiscence, they're all remembrances of God passing over the people of Israel because we passed over the idolatry of Egypt. We said, no, thank you. We will take your God, brazenly slaughter it in your presence and smear its blood on our doorposts. We dare you to come fight with us because we trust in our God who commanded us to worship him alone without partners and not some idolized lamb or any other idolized created thing. Right? That's Pesach. That
It took
is
some
what,
chutzpah.
yes, it's chutzpah, but it's holy chutzpah. It's holy brazenness, holy audacity. It is the ultimate act of humility to reject the audacity to worship a created thing rather than the creator. That is the ultimate audacity. And the audacity to reject that is the ultimate humility. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Mi haba, who's next? If you want to be next, please say ani haba. Or for a woman, ani haba'a. Mi haba batur.
Anihaba.
Bachavod.
What am I reading?
You're reading what's on the screen.
Rabban Gamliel said, anyone who did not say these three things did not fulfill his obligation.
You can read the whole thing.
Well, okay. Pesach, Masa, and Moror. Rabban Gamliel would say anyone who did not say these three matters on Passover has not fulfilled his obligation. The Paschal lamb, matzah, and bitter herbs. Masa, because our forefathers were redeemed from Egypt, as it is stated, and they baked the dough that they took out of Egypt. Exodus 12:39.
Okay. Mi haba batur. Mi rotze likro. Mi haba batur. Who's next in line?
Ani rosa likra.
Likro.
Likro.
There you go. Likro. O-H. O. Likro. Bachavod. You can read it
Maror.
again. You can read it again from the
Okay.
beginning.
Ramban Gamaliel would say, anyone who do not say these three matters on Passover has not fulfilled his obligation, the Paschal lamb, masa, and bitter herbs. Maror, herbs, is because the Egyptians embittered our forefathers' lives in Egypt, as it is stated, and they embittered their lives. Exodus chapter 1, verse 14.
All right, let's say this together out loud. Please make sure that your mics are turned off, but Heather and I keep wanting to say Victor. Don't kill me. I know
Hector.
it is Victor. I keep wanting to say.
Oh.
I'm confusing the H of Heather with the V of Victor, and that's what's going on in my subconscious. All right, so Victor and Heather, please say it together with me. Everybody else with your mics muted. Let's read the 10 plagues. The Eser Hamakoth. The Eser Hamakoth. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and smite every firstborn, both men and animals, and against all the gods of Egypt. I will execute judgments. I am the eternal. All right, let's say it together. The Eser Makot together. 1, 2, 3. Blood.
Blood.
Frog.
Frog.
Blood sucking
Blood-sucking
gnats.
gnats.
Wildlife
ambush.
Pestilence.
Boils.
Boils. Hail. Locust. Darkness. Smiting
Smiting
firstborns.
firstborns.
All right, let's say it together in Hebrew. Dam. Sfardea.
Sfardea.
Kinim.
Kinim.
Arov. Dever. That's right. Let's do it again. Dever. Notice the accent marks. Let's start over again. 1, 2, 3. Dam. Sfardea. Kinim. Arov. Dever. Shihin. Barad. Arbe. Hoshech. Makath Bechoroth. Beautiful. One more time. Makath Bechoroth.
Becharoth.
Got it. Beautiful. And let's say together the 10 plagues, the Eser Hamakoth. Eser
Hamakoth.
Hamakoth, regular K. Eser Hamakoth.
Eser Hamakoth.
Beautiful. All right, you guys. Let's continue. So this was the 10 plagues in Hebrew. If you want to learn them again in depth, please feel free to pause and go back, review as often as you need. Dam, Sfardea, Hinim, Arab, Dever, Shihin, Barad, Arba, Heshech, Makath, Bechoroth. And this we usually say, traditionally, people will dip their pinky or a finger in the salt water or in the wine, and everybody at the table will together take a dip of the finger into the wine and then fling it onto a napkin right next to them or in front of them as they say each of these. So you'll dip your finger in the wine and say, everybody together, dam. They'll then dip their finger and take another little bit and fling it into the napkin, sfardea. And they'll repeat it, everybody together, kinim, aro. If you imagine it going everybody all at once, dever, shihin. And this is not a halakha. This is a pervasive old custom. So you can do it in different ways as well. Whatever is most impactful to you personally or to your family. So you could also just take turns and go around the table that each person does it individually or as a unit. Dam, Sfardea, Kinim, Arab, Dever, Shihin, Barad, Arbe, Hoshech, Makath, Bechoroth. You could also do this in English, okay? So you could do with the flinging of the wine from your finger. Again, you could do it in English. Blood, frog, blood-sucking gnats. People usually translate this as fleas or lice, but the term kinim referred to any sort of little blood-sucking insect. So it's not that it was or lice or gnat or fleas. It could have been one or the other, but the word itself is not one or the other. It's both. All right. بقوا نمشيخ. Exodus from Egypt. Do we have a volunteer? How do we say Exodus from Egypt in Hebrew? If you want to give it a shot, first say Tur Sheli. My turn. Tur Sheli.
Ursheli.
B'chavod. Go right ahead. B'chavod.
Well, let me see.
Tur Sheli.
Let's see. Egypt would be Mitzrayim. Not sure about from. How do you do from Egypt? Ha-Mitzrayim?
Okay, so from in Hebrew typically is meh. Meh. It's a mem prefix, the letter mem, like the letter im as in mother, meh. And it will come before the thing that it is from. Okay. However, although it's possible to use it in this term, it's not what's usually used. Usually they use what's called smichut, which just simply shows association of one word with another. So it's like how we would say Yeshuath Hashem, the salvation of God. So it's more literally Exodus of Egypt. But in English, we don't say that. In English, we say from Egypt. But what will be going on in the term you're going to say in the Hebrew is Exodus of Egypt. So how do we say exit?
To Teshuvah then?
So Teshuvah is deliverance.
The
You could say Teshuvah mi Misraim, deliverance from Egypt. The normal term that's used is before your eyes. Would someone like to practice reading? I would definitely write this down if you guys haven't written anything else. It's an extremely common term. And although you could express the idea in other words in Hebrew and it would be completely understood, but this is the normal term.
Torshili
Bechava.
or Jeshuat Mitzrayim.
All right, let's say it one more time. Make sure not to pronounce the letter Yud like a J. I know that in some dialects, the J and Y are kind of interchangeable. We need to pronounce the Y like the letter yes.
Yeshuat Mitzrayim.
Right? And the letter Saudi, make sure you do it as a TS or as a plosive emphatic S, but not as an SH. One more time. So it needs to be either like Yetzi, Yetzi.
Yetziat Mitzrayim.
Okay, you got it, you got it. So the accent we're going to put on the middle syllable of Misrayim. You want to read it one more time?
Yetziat Mitzrayim.
There you go. Yesiat Misrayim. One more time. Yesiat Misrayim. Yesiat Misrayim. Heather, would you like to read it? Yesiat Misrayim.
Yesiot
It's an
Misrayim.
aleph
Yeah,
instead of
I'm
ayin.
right. Yesiot Misrayim.
Misrayim.
Mitzrayim.
You got it. And how do we know that this yud we should pronounce as a Y and not just as an E vowel? How do we know that? There's a way we
Because
can
it
know.
has-
Go ahead.
Because it
You
has
go
the
ahead, Heather.
because
You guys are competing for the mitzvah. That's excellent. That's the path of the people of Israel. There's actually a midrash about the Israelites competing for mitzvah. All right. Go ahead, Heather.
because it has a vowel attached to it.
Yes, anytime a yud has a vowel associated with it, above or below it, that will tell you definitively that the yud is not simply being an E sound, but rather it represents a consonant sound. A Y is in the letter yes. Anytime yud has a vowel. Yeah, also anytime there's a dagesh, a dot inside the yud. So that would be like right here, but it would be smaller, right? If there's a dot right here, a dagesh, that also indicates that the yud should be pronounced as a consonant. As opposed to here, this yud has no vowel of its own. When the yud has no vowel, that means it's just a stand-in, what do you call it? It's just a stand-in for a vowel. It's just symbolizing a placeholder for a vowel. And in this case, this yud is standing in or representing the vowel right here. So they're literally one and the same. Not just that they both make the same sound, but they're literally the one and the same. Okay? Whereas here it does have a vowel, so it should be a consonant. Here it is not a consonant because there's no vowel of its own. That means it is the vowel. Yalla. Slide haba. Anyone want to give this one a shot? What might this mean? Feel free to
First
guess.
day of the first month of the first.
Yes. Yes, the first day of the first month of the first year on the Hebrew calendar. So a lot of people call Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah, they call it the Jewish New Year. But really, according to Jewish tradition, Rosh Hashanah, it is a new year, but it's not the Jewish New Year. Rosh Hashanah is the new year of creation of all humanity. It is Pesach, the month of Pesach, that is the first month of the Hebrew New Year. Right? And God declares explicitly in the Torah, it is the first of months for you. It's not even a debate in Talmudic literature. So it's kind of funny that it's not even like a divide between rabbinic Jews and quote unquote biblical Jews or Karaite Jews. There's no dispute. It's just that people argue about this thing when there's no even an argument. And two things can be true at once. There are different calendars. So Rosh Hashanah is, in ancient Jewish tradition, a new year, but it is the new year of creation. It's the universal new year. whereas the first of Nisan is the new year of the people of Israel, right? So what might be the nighttime order? What might this refer to? If anybody knows, please give it a guess. Say Tur Shali and then give us a guess. What is this referring to?
Ursheli.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna guess the order of the Seder.
That's exactly right. You want to read it? What does this say?
Seder.
Yes, excellent accent. Victor, kol hakavod. Seder. So is it Seder? Is it the Passover
Seder.
Seder? Or
It
is it
is
the
in
Seder?
Louisiana. Louisiana, I think.
No, that's
Yeah.
even New York, the Seder. That's even in New York, unfortunately. All right, that's just the way they speak, but we should not confuse colloquial English or Anglicized pronunciations of Hebrew. We shouldn't confuse that with proper Hebrew. All right, if you speak that way, even in modern Hebrew, it sounds distractingly odd. Right? You can do it in English when speaking with English speaking American Jews or British Jews, but it's not proper Hebrew. So how do we say the nighttime order, Heather?
Seder.
Yes, the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder. All right, you guys write this down, take notes. You have more than one way to indicate in your transliterations which syllable should be accented. You can either capitalize the accented syllable and lowercase the unaccented syllables, or you can write them all large or all small and just put the little accent symbol over it, which is common in Spanish. You have choice, whatever works best for you. All right, who wants to give this a shot? What is the Haggadah? Maze Haggadah? We are doing Passover-related Hebrew. This is your Hebrew
Tur
Passover.
Shali.
Bechavod, ya'ah.
The
Bechavod, go right ahead.
Haggadah or Haggadah is the telling of the story.
That's right. That's exactly right. So it's in Hebrew, Haggadah, as opposed to the Haggadah. It's okay to say Haggadah, but that's not proper Hebrew. So we shouldn't confuse the two. And as you said, it's the telling, but I have to tell you guys a little secret. Modern Hebrew is the same language as biblical Hebrew, but it's not the same dialect. Okay. It is more similar to biblical Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is more similar to biblical Hebrew than modern English is to Shakespearean English or to the King James Version English. Okay. Modern Hebrew is more similar to biblical Hebrew than modern English is to Shakespearean English. However, they're not the same dialect. Why am I saying this? Many people translate the Haggadah as the telling or the telling over. And it's not false, that is what it is, but that's not the connotation of the word. The reason people have begun translating it as the telling is because in modern Hebrew, not biblical Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, this root word is the commonly used term that expresses to tell someone something. Tegidli, tell me this. Tegidlo et tell him that. But in biblical Hebrew, this root word does have a similar meaning, but it's not the same. In biblical Hebrew, this word has more a connotation of a formal or an important telling of something. It's not just a telling, but it's a type of telling. There's a nuance in the word that has been lost in modern colloquial Hebrew. So it's always important not to confuse modern Hebrew with biblical Hebrew. And we can do that. We can distinguish between the two without making the false claim of Jew haters that modern Hebrew is not Hebrew. It is Hebrew, it's just a different dialect. So in biblical Hebrew, in proper classical Hebrew, this root word doesn't just mean to tell, it means to declare. It's a important telling, to declare or to proclaim something important, right? Whereas in modern Hebrew, it's just general telling. Anybody has a question?
Sounds like a decree.
So it's not a decree, but a decree is a type of Haggadah. It is a type of Haggadah. And that is so interesting that you say it. That is one of the words used in Deuteronomy chapter 17. I think it's verse 10, 9 or 10, especially verse 11, where it says that we should heed, we're obligated by God to heed the instruction that the judge and the priest and the Levite will instruct you from the place that the Lord would choose. The verb there is yagidu, same root word. So that's very good insight, Mr. Not Hector. All right. Victor, would you like to read the pasuk? Would you like to read the verse? Tikra et pasuk. Im אתה רוצה. Tell me if you want to. אני רוצה לקרוא.
אני רוצה לקרוא.
כל הכבוד. Excellent.
And you shall proclaim to your son in that day, saying, it's because of what the Eternal did for me when I came forth out of Egypt. Exodus 13:8.
Okay, so this is where we derive the idea that's well known in rabbinic literature, that we should all view ourselves as having left Egypt and not just our ancestors. Where does that come from? Because God himself commanded us that when we declare the story of the Exodus to our children, we should say that he did it for me, as if we ourselves left. Right? And this is figurative. We could get into why, but just a heads up, a lot of people take this as quote unquote proof of reincarnation. But that's absurd, because if we read the story, God says that he made that covenant with not only those who were standing there that day at Mount Sinai, but also with your children and your children's children, i.e., your children and your children's children are not you, but he made the covenant as if they were there, not that they're literally there. If we're all just a reincarnation of the people who were standing at Mount Sinai, then God would not need to say, with you and with those who are not standing here, because we would all be one and the same. All right. Mihaba, leavened bread. Maze leavened bread. What is leavened bread in Hebrew? Ech omrim, how do you say? Ech omrim, how do you say leavened bread? Ech omrim, leavened bread in Hebrew. Mirotze lahagid. That's modern Hebrew. Who wants to tell us? Mirotze lahagid. Feel free to say my turn, or ani rotze lahagid. I want to say. I want to declare. Ani rotze lahagid. That's the same root word as Haggadah. Lehagid, to declare. Ani rotze lahagid. If you're a woman, ani rotza lahagid.
אני רוצה להגיד.
B'chavod. Tagid, declare it. Tagid. How do you say? Ech omrim, leavened bread in Hebrew. Tagid.
Matzah. Oh, in Hebrew, yeah, matzah. Or
Leavened,
matzah.
leavened bread.
Leaven.
Matzah
Matzot.
is unleavened. Matzah is unleavened.
Oh, like it's a
Starts with the het. Ha.
hamotzi. It's a hamotzi. I can't remember.
We
No,
had that root word. That's the same root as Yetziat Mitzrayim. Hamosi, the one who brings out. Yetziah, the going out of. That's Mosi.
lechem is a lechem. Well, that's just bread. Lechem is just
Yeah,
bread.
Hamosi Lachem, the one who brings out bread, who brings forth bread. Hamosi Lachem. How do we say unleavened? I'm sorry, how do we say leavened bread? Masa is unleavened. Masa is unleavened bread. How do we say leavened bread?
It is. I just had it. I just lost it again.
You know, if you want an escape route, just say mihaba.
Yeah, I'll skip.
Say
I know it, but
mihaba.
I can't.
You don't have to say I'll
Mihaba.
skip. Just ask. Put yourself in a place of authority. You just like look around innocently. Mihaba.
Mihaba.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shehakol nihyo b'dvoro. Most worthy of praise and source of all blessing are you, O eternal, our venerable, powerful authority, King of all existence, by whose utterance all came into being. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shehakol nihyo b'dvoro.
Amen.
If you guys hear somebody say a blessing, you can say Amen. Tizkor mitzvot, Mr. Victor. Maze leavened bread. Ech omrim. How do you say leavened bread? Ech omrim leavened bread be'ivrit.
Well, is it the same as just saying bread by
Bread
chance?
is lechem, so bread could be
Yeah.
leavened or unleavened. And people did eat unleavened bread throughout the year. It kept better.
Yeah.
Isn't it chametz? Obviously, chametz is
Ding,
the
ding, ding,
ladder,
ding,
but
ding, kol hakavod. All right, now let's
yeah.
try to read it a little bit more accurately. Chametz is perfectly acceptable in Jewish communities around the world to say. Don't be embarrassed to say chametz, but let's read it in proper Hebrew, in classical Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. In biblical times, they were not saying chametz. How do we read it in biblical Hebrew? Anybody want to give it a shot? Think about which syllable to accent.
Chametz.
Anybody want to read?
No.
Note the dot under it lets you know that it should not be friction in your mouth. Halakha is not guttural. We know that halakha and chametz, we know that the sound of halakha is not guttural because it's produced between the uvula, the little thing that dangles in the back of your throat, and your lips. Any phoneme, any sound that is produced from the place of your uvula to the lips of your mouth, anything produced in that area is not a guttural letter in the context of Hebrew linguistics. Het is classified by the earliest and all of the early Jewish linguists on the Hebrew language. They all classify the letter het as a guttural letter. By definition, it should not be articulated in the main cavity of your mouth, which is defined as from the area of your uvula to your lips. Instead, het, it is a guttural letter that means by definition that it is produced beyond the uvula. So it's not produced with friction of the back of your tongue and the roof of your mouth and your main oral cavity, your mouth, but it's produced where you produce the letter H. And it's so similar to the letter H that our sages complained about the uncautious readers of the Torah who would pronounce the letter het like an H. And they would do that because it's very similar to H, but it is not an H. All the more so would they be flabbergasted by people who get paid to read the Torah publicly and mistake it for a kaf. That was just unheard of. If het were a ha sound, they would have complained about if it was even similar. If het, quote unquote, was even similar to a ha sound, there would have been people mistaking it for a chaf. That would be occurring rather than people mistaking it for a he, right? But the letter het is very close to the letter he, both in its pronunciation, its articulation, and also in its appearance. And the reason they look similar and sound similar is because they're similar, but they're different. So he is an H sound produced when your throat is completely relaxed. And het is like an H sound produced in the same place, in the same way, but the only difference is it's slightly constrained. Hence, if you would imagine, the leg is attached to exhibit constraint. That can be kind of like a visual mnemonic to help you remember. H is free-flowing, relaxed. Huh. It's a relaxed exhaling. Het is a slightly constrained exhaling, but with no friction in your mouth. Hey, huh. Het, huh. It's like a loud whisper. Hames. Hames. Everybody say hames. It's better if you're not going to pronounce it in the proper way, which you can with practice, but I know it's difficult. In the meantime, it's better to pronounce it like an H, knowing that it's not exact, than to pronounce it as a kha. Kha is very far from it. It's not even in the right part of the head. Hames or hames if you struggle with the head. All right. Heather, would you like to pronounce this word in proper Hebrew?
Hamas.
Right. And which syllable do we pronounce accent?
The second.
All right. Od palm. Once again, how do we say it?
Hamas.
And which syllable should be accented?
Okay. I'm trying to get the
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 het.
het
I know,
right.
I know. I know. Don't worry about that het at the moment, just the accent.
Hamas.
Yes. Hames. Hames. Excellent.
Hamas.
All right. It's not an all or nothing thing, step by step with time. All right. Milah haba'a. Well, first our pasuk. Heather, b'chavod, would you like to read the pasuk? Ani rutza likro. Ani rutza likro. Go ahead, tell me. I want to read.
Ani rosa likro.
B'chavod. Go right ahead.
Whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel.
Okay, Exodus chapter 12, verse 15. So we see it here in the background, right? Hames, right here in the verse. It's lighter text in the background. Milah haba'a, sourdough starter. This is a less known aspect of the prohibition of Hames. What is sourdough starter? Anybody want to tell us? Ani rotze lahagid. If you want to declare to us, say Ani rotze lahagid. If you're a woman, Ani rosa lahagid. I want to declare. I want to declare it. Ani rosa lahagid. I want to proclaim it. Ani rosa lahagid. Ani rotze lahagid.
אני רוצה להגיד.
B'chavod. Go right ahead with honor. Ma ze sourdough starter?
Well, it is chametz, a small portion of it that you use to put into new dough, so it leavens the entire new dough.
Excellent, excellent. All right, now normally hamas doesn't refer to this. Normally hamas refers to leavened bread, leavened bread. But technically and etymologically it is, because the word hamas comes from the root hamus, which means something that has begun to ferment, right? Right?
So is it a different word? Okay, so that's what I was gonna ask, but
I
I saw
kind
it.
of helped you cheat, but do you remember
Yeah.
how to say it? How do we say this? The Torah prohibits both. Not only are we forbidden directly by God, not only are we forbidden from having leavened bread, but we're also explicitly forbidden from having non-bread sourdough starter. That is the leavening agent that is put into dough that would then be baked that makes it leavened. So there's a distinction. Can you explain it to us one more time in your own words, what it is? And then if you know the word, feel free to say it.
So it is, in this case, for sourdough, it is a peas or bacteria in a sense that ferments the bread and that causes it to raise.
Okay, now the
Um,
Torah doesn't prohibit the bacteria. God didn't tell people about things they didn't have words for. So it's
yeah,
not
but
referring to the bacteria.
yeah,
We're not denying that the bacteria exists. We know it exists, but
yeah.
this doesn't refer to the bacteria itself, but rather it refers to
I guess it's a small piece in this case
yeah,
of
that's it. It's the dough. It's the little piece of dough.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
That's used to start the fermenting
a
of
new
another new batch of dough.
yeah.
All right. So how do we say
And
that?
I don't know. I thought it was a sheen, but I can't remember the others.
All
You were
right,
quick.
go right ahead.
Um, Saor, Seor,
Sa'or, sa'or, sa'or,
Seor, Seor.
sa'or. Now, I translated this according to the majority traditions of the people of Israel, where they pronounce the sound of Shavah as a short sound, generally speaking. That's in practice. But in multiple Jewish communities, historically, they distinguished between how you would default pronounce the Shavah when it sounded, as opposed to how you would pronounce it when it comes immediately before a guttural letter. And Aleph is a guttural letter. When it comes before a guttural letter, it leaves its default pronunciation as an and it takes on a shortened form of the vowel of the guttural letter that comes after. In this case, it's an So in the very uh, cautious reading and the very careful, articulate reading of those traditions, it would not be se'or, but it would be sa'or. That's such a nuance, most people won't even get it. But don't think that it's trivial, because a non-native English speaker would think the difference between hat and hate is trivial. But to a native speaker, we hear a clear difference between hat, hate, hut, and hoot, right? This is why an Israeli can say profanity when he says he wants to go to the beach, because he doesn't notice and doesn't articulate between the difference of a beach, which has sand, is on the coast, as opposed to a female dog. Right? So there is a big difference between se'or and se'or, potentially. All right. These differences, while they may seem trivial to a non-native speaker, do mean something to native speakers, especially if they are in the more uh, developed Hebrew language, the inventory of the Hebrew lexicon of biblical Hebrew, which had been developing beyond just the words that we have in the Bible. A lot of, especially Christian, um, studious Christians, they often, forgivingly, we can forgive them for this, but they often forget that Hebrew was a living language when the Bible was given, and it was more than just the words contained in any particular book of the Bible, right? When the Torah was given, just because a word didn't appear in the Torah didn't mean it didn't exist. And likewise, there are Hebrew words in post-biblical Hebrew literature that aren't found in the Bible. It doesn't mean they didn't exist during the time of the Bible. So se'or in popular pronunciation, that's popular, relatively accurate pronunciation, se'or, as well as modern Hebrew, se'or, or se'or, and in the more articulate, careful pronunciations, se'or, se'or. All right, that's the sourdough starter. Emmanuel, would you like to read the pasuk? Would you like to read the pasuk, the verse? Say, ani rotze likro. I want to read. Ani rotze likro.
Virotzelikro.
B'chavod.
7 days shall there be no leavening agent found in your houses. For whosoever eats leavened grain, that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether immigrant or native in the land. Question with this. Exodus
Exodus
12,
chapter
19.
12, verse 19. Yes, sir.
So does that mean, if you have what we call it today, the leavening agent is the powder stuff, what's it
Excellent
called?
question. Excellent
Uh,
question. If that
I
powdered
can,
stuff does not contain any product of the five grains that are special to the Torah, if it does not contain any product of that grain or that grain itself in it, and it's nothing more than just the bacterial agent and some sort of carrier solution, and the solution that it's in or attached to is not of the grains mentioned in the Torah, which are like spelt, barley, wheat, and rye. Okay, if it's not one of those, then there's no prohibition in having it.
okay. Yeah, I think it's yeast. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah,
To
the
rice. Yeah.
actual biological organism is called yeast. And so we should not confuse yeast for this word, sa'or. A lot of people translate it that way. It's not exact. I understand why they do it, and there's a aspect of truth to it, but it's not, as far as the Torah prohibition, it's not the Torah prohibition. And if it
then it's
were,
okay.
then you couldn't even drink wine on Passover. Go ahead.
Okay. So then it's okay to have it as long as it's not mixed with the flour in this case
Correct.
and
Correct.
water. Then
And you want to know if that little packet itself contains. I really don't know. I haven't looked into that. But it may be common knowledge to people who bake. I don't know. It shouldn't be too difficult to find it.
Okay.
The prohibition is not on the bacterial agent itself. It's on the dough as dough that has reacted with that. And then it's on any bread that has been leavened with that dough, right? But the prohibition is not on the bacteria itself. That bacteria is everywhere. You're not violating the Torah because there's air in your house. You know, that bacteria floats in the air. All right, let's continue. Selling of leaven. Does anyone know how to say the selling of leaven in Hebrew? Ech omrim, how do you say? Ech omrim, selling of leaven. This is one of the most well-known concepts in the Torah observant world. Okay. Mi haba בתור? Who's
It'll
next?
be okay. I'll wait.
Mi haba or ba'a? Mi haba'a? Mi haba'a o haba? Mi haba o haba'a? מי רוצה לקרוא?
Me
Go ahead.
לקרוא.
אתה?
I was gonna
אתה רוצה לקרוא? You want to read?
yes. How do I say yes? No.
כן, כן,
Just
כן, אני רוצה לקרוא.
Ken with a K or with an
Kaf,
H?
with a regular K
Kaf.
sound.
Okay.
כן,
Ken.
כן, אני
Okay.
רוצה לקרוא. Yes, I
Ken
want to.
אני רוצה לקרוא.
בכבוד, אחי. Go right ahead.
מכירת חמץ. חמץ, yeah.
That's right.
מכירת.
מכירת חומץ, or in modern Hebrew, מכירת חמץ. בכבוד. You did excellent pronunciation. So let me call on somebody else. Heather, would you like to read and enunciate the syllables appropriately?
Mehira.
I got to hear that tav at the end. That's very important. That's actually an entire word. That's what's indicating the of in the English, is that tav at the end. So let's read it one more time.
Mehiras. Hames.
Mesuyon, Mesuyon. Kol hakavod, ya ukhti. Excellent. All right. So you guys write these expressions down. You don't have to write every single Hebrew word down that we've learned today, but this one particularly is one of the well-known ones. It says something to an established Jewish community or a member of a mainstream Jewish community. It says something to them about you if you know this term, if you can use this term. It lets them know that you're at a more advanced degree of learning and of knowledge and experience with Torah and the Jewish world, right? It lets them know that you're not somebody who just recently started learning and that maybe has a little bit too big of an ego, thinking that their ego is the Holy Spirit. It's very easy for us to mistake our inner hunches and our inner opinions and our inner voice with the Spirit of God. And a lot of sincere people make that mistake. If you know this term, that will be an indication that you're not doing that you're not one of those people. Maybe you are, but the likelihood is less if you know this term. And so certain key words kind of say something, they have certain cultural connotation. Checking for leaven. Checking for leaven. Ech omrim, how do you say checking for leaven? מה זה checking for leaven בעברית? What is checking for leaven in Hebrew? איך אומרים checking for leaven בעברית? איך אומרים? אני רוצה להגיד, if you want to declare it, if you want to tell us to declare it, then say אני רוצה להגיד, I want to declare, I want to let people know. אני רוצה להגיד. I want to tell. If you're a woman, you would say אני רוצה. אני רוצה להגיד. If you want to do biblical Hebrew, אני רוצה. אני רוצה להגיד. אני רוצה להגיד. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but even though biblical Hebrew, classical Hebrew has some notable exotic pronunciations compared to modern Hebrew. But if you say them slowly, they would be mutually intelligible. And I think that's incredible. Even though they're different, but if they're said slowly, it's mutually intelligible. And I think that's awesome. In modern Hebrew, compared to biblical Hebrew, notice the difference. It's different, but you can make it out. In modern Hebrew, אני רוצה להגיד, אני רוצה להגיד, אני רוצה להגיד. And in biblical Hebrew, אני רוצה להגיד, אני רוצה להגיד, להגיד, אני רוצה להגיד. That's the difference. English, compared to the old German that it originated from, is unintelligibly different. It's unrecognizable. It's incredible that we are, even in modern Hebrew, we are speaking a type of Hebrew that if we would speak it slowly and carefully, Moses could understand us. Ech omrim, how do we say checking for leaven?
אני רוצה לקרוא.
Okay, בכבוד.
בדיקת חמץ.
Okay, and make sure I know you did pronounce it, you clearly pronounce the T at the end of all words. That's a little challenging to most English speakers because we don't usually do that, native speakers of English. We usually either drop the T at the end of words or we pronounce it as a glottal stop, as an like it, he hit it. But in Hebrew, you need to pronounce the T clearly. That's because it actually has meaning. It means something. And if you drop it, you drop that meaning. Go ahead.
So, medicat.
Bit, as in boy.
Yeah.
Again,
Medicat chametz.
All right, excellent. I really should have deleted this.
Chametz. Oh,
they're both correct. But normally people would say it without a hey. Bediqat hummus. Bediqat hummus. I have it correct in the transliteration. And this is not grammatically incorrect, it's just not what we would normally say. What we have in the Hebrew is the checking of the hummus, the checking of the leavened bread. Normally, we would not say the V. We would just say checking of leaven. All right. All right. Bediqath hummus. Bediqath hummus. Heather, would you like to read it?
Bedikoth Hametz.
Excellent. Mr. Victor, would you like to read it?
Bedichat hametz.
Beautiful.
Bedichat hametz.
Miss Suyon. Excellent. Excellent. If anybody wants to learn how to pronounce the Saudi in the classical way, in the biblical Hebrew way, as opposed to the modern Hebrew and the European Hebrew way, which is as a TS, right? Non-Ashkenazi communities did not say that. Even in recent history, they did not pronounce this as a TS. So when people say modern Hebrew uses Sephardic pronunciation, it's not Sephardic pronunciation. It's a synthesis of Ashkenazi pronunciation and Sephardic vowels. But modern Hebrew, popular modern Hebrew pronunciation of the consonants is overwhelmingly Ashkenazi, overwhelmingly. And its pronunciation of the vowels is mostly Sephardic, mainstream Sephardic. It is not, generally speaking, Sephardic pronunciation. So in non-Ashkenazi, Sephardic, especially Middle Eastern, those two often get conflated, and I do that as well because of the way people usually speak. But in classical Hebrew and in Middle Eastern Jewish Hebrew, the letter Sadi was not a TS. It's a type of S. It's not a regular S like in English, but it's closer to an S, even closer to an English S than it is to a TS. And that's indicated with a dot to let you know it's not a regular S like in English. It's not a regular English S. So how do you make it? How do you articulate it? So the regular S, I'm kind of self-conscious here because I don't know what I'm looking like, but a regular S, you take the tip of your tongue. Okay, you can hide your video if you're embarrassed. You take the tip of your tongue and you touch, you make contact. You produce the S sound by contact of the tip of your tongue to just behind your upper front teeth. Okay, you have a flow of air with this contact. That's a regular S in English. With the if this is my front teeth and this is the tip of my tongue, it's like right behind it. That's a regular S in Hebrew, like a sin or a samich. With the Saudi, what you're doing is this is the teeth. The regular S is like right about here. This is the tongue. With the Saudi, you need to make that same type of contact just a little bit further back, right before the roof of your mouth goes up. So if you feel right here, near your actual teeth, upper front teeth, if you feel your gums right behind your upper front teeth, it's hard. And if you go back a little bit with the tip of your tongue, you'll feel that it suddenly goes up, like the flat roof arches. You want to make the contact right before it goes up, just a little bit further away from your front teeth than a regular S. And that's how you produce a Saudi. You do that while slightly constricting your tonsils. Not really your tonsils, but I don't know how else to explain it in layman's terms. You slightly constrict your throat while doing that, and that produces the Saudi. That's called pharyngalizing. It's a pharyngalized S. Saw, saw. So Saudi is saw, and seen is sa. Saw. You can also do it by lowering the tip of your tongue and elevating the middle part of your tongue. They produce the same sound, and you'll hear different different explanations, but it's the same. It's indistinguishable. Any questions about that before you move on? I know it's an exercise in lingual skill. Any questions? Yalla. We're about to wrap it up. Let's continue. Just like the last one, right? Just like selling of leaven is sort of a cultural or social indicator of your respect for the historical people of Israel, not just being your own authoritative interpreter of the Bible and God's commands, but is an indication that you recognize and value and respect the historical Jewish people and their tradition that they received from the sages of ancient Israel. So also, if you know this term for checking of leaven, bedikat hames. Bedikat hames. Okay, bedikah means checking of or looking for. It's really checking of or looking out for it. And hames is the leavened bread. Burning of leaven. Likewise, please write these. If you don't write anything else down today, write these expressions. Selling of leaven, mechirat hames. Checking for leaven, bedikat hames. And burning of leaven. Does anyone know how to say burning of leaven? I'll give you a moment. This is a very noticeable practice in Israel if you're in Israel around Passover time. On the eve of Passover, you will smell the burning of bread all over the place. And really, a lot of people burn much more than is necessary, and that's a problem. And you don't have to burn. There are other ways you can get rid of it. The point is that you've nullified it from your domain, from your possession. Mirotse likro. Let's get someone new. Mirotse likro. Likro. O-H. Likro. Mirotse likro. If you're a woman, you can say Ani rosa likro. Or Ani rosa likro.
Ani rosa likro.
Bechavod, Sadiqa. Bechavod. Go right ahead.
Bri or biur hames.
Beautiful. Bi'ur hames. Bi'ur hames. Bi'ur hames. Burning of leaven. Again, people do often and usually burn it, whatever was excess that they didn't sell. But this is kind of like again, this is a kind of an archetype way of, it's a reference to the general way that they were getting rid of leaven historically. But it's sufficient if you just throw it in your trash can or if you feed it to animals, whatever. Colloquially, burning of leaven refers to any destruction of the leaven. Bi'ur means to burn. It's the same root word in the prohibition in the Torah of igniting or kindling a fire on the Sabbath day. All right, blessing of trees, what we did at the beginning of the lesson. So I want you guys to go out and say this blessing. Go out, and when you see the budding trees, say this blessing. How do we say the blessing of trees? I'll give people a moment. All right. Mirot Selikro. Mirot Selikro. Who wants to read? Anirot Salikro. I want to read, feminine. Aniro Salikro. I want to read, masculine. Anirot Selikro. In modern Hebrew, Anirot Selikro. Anirot Selikro. Anirot Selikro. Likro. Likro.
Military crawl.
Likro. Make sure it's an O. Likro. Likro.
Crawl.
All right. Bechavod.
Okay. Barachat or barachot.
Take note of the vowel under the first letter.
Oh, birachat. Birachat. Barachat.
Assume any shava, assume it is silent unless you know for sure it should be sounded. And take note of the dagesh in the next to last letter of the first word.
Okay. Bir, birchot, birchat. This
Okay,
one,
you got it. You got it. Birkat.
birchat,
In modern
yeah.
Hebrew, birkat.
Birkat, okay. Birkat, ha'ilanit, ha'ilanit.
The final vowel is an Herlan.
Oh, ha'ilanot. Sorry. I was
Right.
stuck with it. It looked like an E to me in Latin, I guess.
Right. Birkat ha'ilanot. It's a well-known and beloved blessing. People get excited about going out and all the trees are budding and the flowers are blooming. Birkat ha'ilanot. You can make it a family adventure, a family outing with your kids to the park, and use it as an opportunity to teach your children. Make it a picnic, and it'll make the observance of Torah and the praising of God beloved in their hearts. They'll associate it with family time and fun picnics from their childhood if you do that. Birkat ha'ilanoth. So many of you may already know the word es or etz, like etz ha'im hi lama haziqim ba. Es is a more common word for tree, but ilanot is not super rare. Whereas es, the more common word for tree, ain sadi, sofit. Whereas es is the more common word for tree, whereas it also can mean wood or something wooden. Ilan is a word for tree that pretty much just means tree. It doesn't get used in reference to wood. But the word es can be wood or a tree. Okay, I'm going to read these quickly for you guys. If you want, you can say it together with me. If anybody has any questions, please write them down, and you can ask after we get through the list. But this is to really give a deep dive on very common terminology related to Passover. But these words, some of these are pretty important. Others, I would say, are less critical. We can talk about that afterwards. Let's just read through them. I'm on the left side. Pay attention and write them down because I did not transliterate them for you. حل هم حل هم intermediate days. حل هم سفيرات عمر سفيرات عمر counting of the sheaf tithe. سفيرات عمر أربع كسف أربع كسف أربع كسف the 4 cups. أربع كسف قدوش قدوش sanctification. قدوش. This is usually done over yayin, wine or grape juice. Yayin. Yayin is wine or grape juice. Yayin, yayin, not yain, not yain, but yayin. There are 2 consonant Y's. Yayin. Sheheyanu. This is missing a he. There should be a shin, he, het. Sheheyanu. Sheheyanu. Who enlivened us. It's referring to one of the most well-known blessings in Jewish tradition. Sheheyanu. Sheheyanu. Shin he het yud nun vav. Who enlivened us. Sheheyanu. Natlilath yodayim. Natlilath yodayim. Lifting of hands refers to ritual washing, or halachically mandated, rabbinically mandated hand washing. It literally means the lifting of hands. Blessed are you, O eternal, our God, King of all existence, who commanded us regarding the lifting of hands. When we understand what it literally means, people tend to have less of an issue with saying that God commanded us to do it, because the lifting of hands is a euphemism for surrender to God. Okay, not only is it the ritual washing of hands, but it's a surrender to God, and it's symbolized in the cleansing of your hands and the lifting of your hands, the surrender of your will to His. Natlilath yodayim. In popular Ashkenazi lingo, natilas yadayim. Natilas yadayim. Natlilath yodayim. Natlilath yodayim. Shulhan. Shulhan. Table or platter. Historically, they did the Passover feast on lower platters. People would sit on the ground or near the ground on cushions, and platters would be placed before each person. And you can still do this today on a table. Give large platters so that it'll have a more communal feel. You don't have to be stuck with the little ceremonial looking plates. You could have that as well if you like. It's not all or nothing. Shulhan, a table. This is the regular word for table in modern Hebrew as well. Shulhan or shulchan in pop pronunciation, shulchan, like Shulchan Aruch. There's Shulchan Aruch. Shulhan. Number 9, karpas. Karpas is a leafy green. It should be a leafy green, and historically it's literally celery. It's the same root in Arabic and in Persian from which it probably derived. Karpas. Harusef. 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 Horosis. Horosis. Harusef. Mortar dip. It's from a root word for clay or mortar, and it's in remembrance of the mortar that the ancient people of Israel, the ancestors of the Jewish people and of the Samaritans, were forced through slave labor to deal with every day. Harusef. It's a sweet dip. Because there was sweetness in our suffering, it was laying the foundation for the redemption of God's people. Manishtana, 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 halayla hazeh, mikol halelot, mikol halelot. Man nishtanna. What changed? What's different about tonight? Man nishtanna. Hallel, 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 Hallel. Literally means praise. It's the same word in the famous expression Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallel. Hallel means praise, and it usually refers in Jewish halachic context, usually refers to the recitation of Psalms chapter 113 through 118. Hallel. Washing, rahisa, rahisa, rahitza, rachitza, rahisa. Washing, it's a gerund. It's the noun form in reference to the action. Rahisa. Se'uda, 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 or se'uda. Se'uda is the festive meal. Se'uda. Ureah, ureah, ureah. Or ureach, ureach, ureah, ureah is a guest. One who has guests, the orphans, widows, the poor, newcomers, or any broken or neglected person at his se'udah, at his festive meal, is regarded as if he hosted the divine presence. Re'ah. Krich, krich, often called Hillel's sandwich. Krich is from a Hebrew word for to be enclosed in something. It refers to a fold-over type sandwich, like a pita, how a pita can fold, or a lafa. Krich. And this can only be done with the traditional type of masa, the traditional type of matzah. The traditional type of unleavened bread was not a big hard cracker. You can use big hard crackers that are unleavened for your matzah. It's not forbidden. But this word and its reference in all Haggadot, all the Passover Seder guides, this word itself is clear and explicit testimony that matzah doesn't have to be hard crackers. You cannot make a fold-over sandwich with a hard cracker. And this is not a modern leftist, liberal Jewish invention. This is the term used in classical Jewish literature for Hillel's sandwich. I dare you to try to fold over your hard cracker matzah without making it snap. Krich. Hillel's sandwich. Zecher lamikdash. Zecher lamikdash. Zecher means remembrance. La is two. In this context, it's like of. Zecher, two or four. Mikdash, the sacred sanctuary. Zecher lamikdash, the temple remembrance. Zecher lamikdash. In popular practice, it's a shenkbon. Historically, it was actually two types of meat. Two types of meat. Just don't have it in its whole form unless you're eating an actual legitimate Passover offering. But even without the offering, you are permitted to eat meat on your Passover Seder. Zecher lamikdash is a remembrance of the temple. Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach, the Passover offering. The word usually translated here as offering or sacrifice, Passover sacrifice, does not literally mean sacrifice. It literally means a drawing near. Korban Pesach. Same root word, same word in Arabic, by the way, used by Muslims. Qurban. Eid al-Qurban. It's a well-known Muslim holiday. Surprise, surprise. They took a lot from the prophets of Israel and the sages of Israel without giving credit where credit is due. Basar, basar, meat or flesh. There is a difference in English, but in Hebrew, basar can be used both in reference to regular meat that you're eating, and it can also be used in the literary sense of referring to humanity in general, like God of all flesh, or all flesh cries out to the living God. Same word, basar. Also in Arabic, same root word can be used in reference to humans. Mayim ahronim. Mayim ahronim. The final waters. Mayim ahronim. Mayim is water, always in plural form in Hebrew. Ahronim, the final. It's grammatically plural, even if it's just one cup of water, because it's always plural. That's just the way the word is in Hebrew. Mayim ahronim refers to the ritual washing of one's hands before saying grace after meals, the prayer after a meal. The sages of Israel instituted this, stating that it's protection against dangerous salts, what they call melah sadom, sodomite salt. And that's in reference to dangerous salts that were found around the Dead Sea. However, many early authorities, and I think it's very rational and makes sense what they state, the fact that the sages instituted this specifically after eating bread and not as a general requirement after eating anything salty is indication that it was just a way in order to get people to be more careful to rinse their hands before saying Birkat Hamazon as an act of reverence to God, so that we will not be saying the grace after meals with dirty hands when the grace after meals is a divinely commanded obligation, whereas the daily Amidah is not. The Amidah is rabbinic, yet we wash our hands by rabbinic decree before we say the Amidah. And yet we're not going to wash our hands before we say the grace after meals, which is decreed by God. So they instituted Ma'im Haronim, stating that it's out of concern for dangerous salt because it's easier to get people to do a practice out of fear. It's just the way that it is. And such salt did exist, but it's easier psychologically to get people to start doing a practice than if you just tell them, maybe you should be washing your hands before you say the blessing, especially a blessing that God directly commanded us to do. And Zimun refers to the formal invitation to communal recitation of the grace after meals. Zimun, when three or more people of the same gender have eaten together intentionally, then there is a certain way in which we recite the grace after meals in a more formal and beautified way. So there will be a call to prayer, just like we have at the beginning of the Shema, when we say the Shema together. But this is even if it's only three individuals who know the creator of the universe, old enough to know the creator of the universe exists, to whom they bless, and an appointed leader will make the invitation, and then everybody will respond, and then the leader continues and he recites the grace out loud, and everybody responds amen. If there are less than three of the same gender, then each person does it individually, unless someone doesn't know the grace, doesn't know how to say it. Then you can have somebody say it out loud, and they can respond amen to fulfill their duty. Birkat Hamazon, Birkat Hamazon, the blessing of nourishment, refers specifically to grace after a bread-based meal. Birkat, blessing of, the attribution of value, the expression of gratitude by recognizing the value, the worth in the one who gave us nourishment. Birkat Hamazon. Ya ale wa yova, Ya ale wa yova, Ya ale wa yova. In modern Hebrew, Ya'aleh v'yavo, Ya'aleh v'yova, is the Torah holiday prayer edition. So it's an addition made to the Amidah and also to grace after meals on a divinely commanded holiday, okay? As opposed to on Hanukkah or Purim. Even though Purim is a biblical holiday, it's not an explicit command of God. So we do not make Ya'aleh v'yavo on Purim or on Hanukkah in order to distinguish them from the divine commandments of God, so that we're not adding to the commandments. Ya'aleh v'yova is added to the Amidah and to the grace after meals, even on the new moon. It is not added on a Sabbath. Sabbath has its own little addition. And finally, Har Pesach Kasher Sameach. So if somebody wishes you a happy Passover, a Har Sameach, you can respond with a more full and greater blessing in return, which is common to respond to blessings with an even greater and beautified blessing. So if they say Hag Sameach or Happy Holidays, you can respond Hag Pesach Kasher Sameach, a festival, pilgrimage festival of Passover that is, may it be kosher and joyful. Hag Pesach Kasher Sameach. Heather, would you like to read it for us?
Hag Pesach Kasher Wasameach.
Beautiful. Pesach kasher v'sameach lama'an shemo, for the sake of his name and for the freedom of all who trust in him. Lama'an shemo. All right, that concludes today. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap it up? We covered several topics. I'll give you guys a chance again to look. These are the final topics that we touched on. Intermediate days, counting the sheaf tithe, the 4 cups, not the counting the sheaf, but counting of the sheaf tithe, counting the homer, the 4 cups, sanctification, wine, grape juice, who enlivened us, the lifting of hands, the table or the platter at the Passover seder, leafy green celery, the mortar dip. What changed? Why is this night different? The praise, hallel, the washing, hand washing, festive meal, guests, the fold-over sandwich, Hillel's sandwich. And it's a fold-over sandwich. Don't forget that. Don't let people tell you any different. The drawing near of Passover, the Passover offering, meat, flesh, the final waters, the invitation to grace, grace, literally the blessing of nourishment, the Torah Holiday Prayer Edition, and the Passover greeting. Any questions? I'll just show you guys everything. Maybe something will come to mind. Any questions? All right, on that note, if anyone has any questions regarding any of these topics, feel free to leave them in the comments below or on our Facebook, WhatsApp, or Telegram Mishnah Walk community groups. We'll conclude with our prayer of gratitude to God for being with us in our studying and forgiving us for any errors and giving us the tools to distance ourselves from adding to his Torah or from removing, from declaring what is permitted that it's forbidden or forbidding what is permitted. Mirotze likro. Mirotze likro. Who wants to read? Mirotze lehitpallel. Who wants to pray? Mirotze lehitpallel. If you want to say the prayer, say, Ani rotze, I want. If you're a woman, Ani rotza, I want. Lehitpallel. Lehitpallel, to pray. Ani rotze lehitpallel. Ani rotze lehitpallel.
Ani rotze lehit pase
Ani rotze lehitpallel. P is in
palel
pickle. Lehitpallel. Ani
lehit.
rotze lehitpallel.
Ani rotze lehit
Pallel. That's
palel.
it. Let's say it 3 times. Make
Oh
sure
my
you pronounce
goodness.
T's in Hebrew. English speakers often drop T's at the end of syllables. Well, we don't realize we're doing it, but that's normal in English. So make sure that you pronounce the T's in Hebrew always. Lehit t, lehit pallel. Ani rotze lehit pallel. One more time. Ani rotze lehit pallel.
Ani rose lahit palel.
Perfect, Habibi. Bakhavod, go right ahead. You can read as much as you want. When you want to stop, somebody else will take over.
Mode ani le
F isn't
panecha
friend.
lifanecha Adonai Elohai Shasamka
Shasamta,
Shasamta uh, Hilki
Helqi, Helqi.
Helki uh, Mi Miosba
It's so Yosheve, the dot that would normally be over the right side of the sheen, is kind of indicated by the dot of the holam right before it. Mi Yosheve,
Miyoshve uh, Bait
Beth, Beth.
Beth Midrash.
Beautiful. Let me translate that and then we can keep going. I am grateful before you, O Eternal, the powerful authority over me, who has placed that you have placed my portion among those who dwell in the house of study. Tamshich b'chavod. If you want to lehitpalel, if you want to pray, tamshich lehitpalel, continue to pray. Tamshich
Willow
lehitpalel.
Willow Samta Hal Hal Halki Mayo
Me,
Sve
me,
Mi Yos
sh,
Miyoshve uh, Kira Noth
good. So I am also grateful before you, O Eternal, that you have not placed my portion among those who sit idly on street corners. Tamshich lehitpalel. Tamshich lehitpalel.
Sha Ani Mashkaim
There's
Mashkaim
no there's no
Mash
vowel above or below.
Mashkim
Yeah, there's no vowel above or below the yud. So that tells us the yud here is not acting as a consonant, not acting as a Y. Mashkim. Ani
Mashkim
mashkim.
Wahem Mesh Mashkamim
Od palm again. Od palm.
Mashkimim
Perfect. Tagid od palm. Say it one more time.
Mashkamim
Mashkimim. Mashkimim.
Mashkimim
Or I get up early. Ani mashkim. And they get up early. Wahem mashkimim. Tamshich. Unless you're
Ani
tired. Tamshich
oh no
lehitpalel.
go a little far Ani Mish Mash Mashkim led 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 dever lady yeah sorry
You're doing great.
led devar
Hmm? The dot.
led yeah led de
E.
va
The D.
lady oh I was thinking hard yeah wrong spot okay lady lady ver ver ver
Le divre. Le divre.
lady vre
There you go. Silent
uh
Shava, unless you know it should be pronounced.
lady
Ani,
vre
אני משכים לדברי.
Torah wahem mashkemim לדברים bes lim beslim. I'm still at the same letter. Sorry. What do you?
Look at
What
this.
am I
Look at this letter.
Yeah, that's the S.
This letter.
Uh-huh.
Letter. What's the difference? There's a difference.
Well, it's a different letter. Bet.
So this is a te, the letter te. It's like in modern Hebrew, it's like a regular T. Batalim, batalim,
Betalim. Betalim.
batalim.
Betalim.
Mishu rotse letargem. Does someone want to translate? Mishu rotse letargem. Mishu rotse letargem. If you want to translate letargem, then you say ani rotse letargem. I want to translate. Ani rotse letargem. M as in mother. Letargem. If you're a woman, go ahead.
רוצה לתרגם.
מעולה. כל הכבוד. Excellent. בכבוד. You can begin translating here.
I get up early to matters of Torah, and they get up early to empty matters.
If you want, you can continue translating. Reading. You can read and translate. At each stop, you can translate. تترجمي. تقري, read, وتترجمي. تقري وتترجمي. Read and translate.
אני עמל והם עמלים. I work hard and they work hard. אני עמל ומקבל שכר.
Silent schwa, unless you know for sure.
ומקבל
There you go. אני عمل ومقبل.
שכר. והם עמלים ואין מקבלים
Yeah.
שכר.
Very good. تترجمي, translate. تترجمي.
I work hard and receive reward, and they work hard and do not receive reward.
ממש טוב. כל הכבוד. Does anybody else want to practice before we wrap it up for the week? Even if you just want to practice one word, it's worth it for you. אין הביישן לומד. מה זה? אין הביישן לומד. The shy one struggles extra hard to learn. Don't be shy when it comes to learning.
Ani, shoot, I forgot the other word. Ani רוצה.
לקרוא. אני רוצה לקרוא.
אני רוצה לקרוא. There we go.
כל הכבוד, כל הכבוד. Yeah.
Okay, אני רץ לכם. רצים.
Do you feel comfortable to translate anything?
I run and they run, I believe.
Exactly, that's right. אני רוץ והם רוצים. I run and they run. תמשיך. תמשיך לקרוא. Continue to read. תמשיך לקרוא.
אני רץ לחיי.
Right? لحية, we really want to hear this
لحية.
yud. لحية, consonant yud.
לחיי. העולם הבא. בכם רצים.
Hold on a second. With the he, we need to be very careful to not have any friction when we pronounce he. So
Vehem.
either we want to pronounce it like a regular soft H, like he helped her,
Yeah.
or you want to make it silent. Better to make it silent than to pronounce it raspy.
Vehem. Vehem.
So either wahem or waem, but certainly not wachem. You don't want to do cha.
Vehem.
There you go. That's perfect. Wahem.
Vehem ratzim. Le. Li. Live. Live. Ar. Live.
Air.
Air. Live.
Yeah.
Air. Shahat.
Shahath. Shahath.
Shahat.
All right. Ani ros. لحيه ها علم هبا وهم رصيم ليفئر شاحث أني رص لحيه ها علم هبا وهم رصيم ليفئر شاحث. Okay, تترجم. نترد لترجم. Do you want to translate? لترجم.
I ran for the life of the world to come, and they ran to the pit of destruction.
كل هكذا. Excellent, Habibs. You guys are amazing. You guys are amazing.
You're an amazing teacher.
كل هكذا. يشتبه شمو. All right, so you guys saw how awesome they read. All three of you guys read so amazing. So if you also want to learn how to read more quickly, more accurately in Hebrew, you got to join the Mishnah Walk. Special access to paying members. Speak to Mr. Victor for details. So, Mr. Emmanuel, would you like to lead us in a closing prayer of thanks to God and request for his guidance and presence in the rest of our week?
Sure. Our Father, we thank you for the opportunity to study Torah, and we pray that your blessings will be upon us and upon the land of Israel to have peace during this time, during this holiday of Pesach. And we pray that to give us the wisdom and understanding to honor this holiday and to find comfort and closeness to you and to your Torah. And we thank you for the rabbi for taking the time to teach us and to guide us. And we pray for forgiveness for anything that we may do in error. And we thank you for the life that we've been given today. Amen.
Amen. That was excellent.
Amen.
You guys have a great week. Thank you again, Heather and Victor, and everybody else for joining with us. You guys are awesome. Every week you make my week. God bless you.
Shavuot
Tov.
Shavua tov ומבורך עליכם ועל כל ישראל וכל